Chapter 1476. Cough. Orgrim let out a muffled groan. As a Forsaken One, he retained the ridiculous power he had when he was alive. It could be said that there was an absolute difference in power between him and the Forsaken who were humans when they were alive. But he was being suppressed by Gurdig. Not only was he being suppressed, he was being beaten up. The warriors of the Horde were driven by their hearts of glory. They could be cruel and tyrannical, but they would never be despicable. Gurdig, on the other hand, was different. As a laborer, he had no taboos when it came to fighting. He clearly had the upper hand in terms of power, but this guy was pouring power into his weapon in an attempt to suppress him. To be more precise, he was using evil acid breath. From Gurdig's smelly mouth, he spat out a mouthful of nature's acid breath that was similar to the green dragon's. Caught off guard, Orgrim was hit on the spot. In a battle between Horde warriors, the most they would do was to bare their teeth and try to overwhelm their opponent with their aura. Who knew that their opponent would be so despicable as to directly use acid breath? Orgrim's face looked as if it was splashed with acid. The pain of having his soul corroded by the power of nature made him cry out in pain. He rolled backwards like a lazy donkey. Obviously, Gurdig wasn't going to let Orgrim go. He took a huge step forward and swung his battle axe, mercilessly landing a acid wound on Orgrim's back. This type of attack also contained acid, and it would cause continuous damage to Orgrim. Shameless. Thrall couldn't take it anymore. He waved the hammer of destruction and charged forward, smashing Gurdig's head with the hammer. Get out of my way. I have business with this idiot who killed millions of orc warriors. Gurdig mocked. Sal only felt that his heavy body suddenly became light, and he did not know how he was sent flying backwards. It was a mysterious power that involved dark energy, and it forcefully expelled Thrall. This was not the end. The next moment, Thrall felt his blood being forcibly ignited by an external evil energy. Huff! It was as if there were 100,000 lighters in his body, using small flames to roast every inch of his blood vessels. Although the pain of his blood boiling was not enough to make Sal collapse, it was definitely not a good feeling. Sal suddenly understood how this traitorous evil beastman in front of him got his surname, Bloodboil. Gurchid's abilities were practically the enemy of all living beings. Sal was a little regretful. If he had followed Duque's strategy and configured the tactics and strategies in advance, he would not be in such a passive position. There were so many powerful warriors in the tribe, and it was long past the time when 2 or 3 little kittens could only hold up the front. Just as Gurdig sent Sar flying, Gogoma, who had been subdued 2 months ago and was originally guarding the walls of Hellfire, pounced forward. When Kilrog Deadeye and Kargith Bladefist, the 2 traitors who had revived and then betrayed the tribe, were killed by Sar, Gogoma rejoined the tribe. This expert of the Shattered Palm clan had lost both his arms a long time ago. He waved the 2 short axes that replaced his forearms and slashed at Gurchich. Wajin's spear and Anastrian's fireball hit Gurdig at the same time. Gurdig displayed an agility that did not match his figure. He actually took an extremely exaggerated step back, retreating a full 5 meters. There was not the slightest bit of annoyance on his face. Instead, it was full of ridicule. He spat out 7 words. Come out. Soul box. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire environment around him suddenly changed. The originally dimly lit temple was suddenly filled with many translucent ghosts wandering in the air. They were full of mournful whispers of souls, causing every living being to shiver. The temple of Karabair, the holy land of the Drenii, was once so dignified and majestic. In the temple there was a divine weapon passed down by the Drenii from generation to generation. The Soul Box. When the most outstanding leader, the wisest prophet, and the bravest warrior of the tribe died, the Drenii stored their souls in the Soul Box, hoping to use the power of the divine weapon to make these great souls immortal. Unfortunately, nearly 30 years ago, the Beastmen occupied the Temple of Karabair. Ghoul. Dan quickly noticed the energy contained in the Soul Box. He found the souls of the innocent Drenii who died tragically in the war, and put them into the Soul Box. He also put the souls of the bloodthirsty Beastmen into the Soul Box. Combined with his own dark magic, the Soul Box was finally corrupted. But Ghoul Dan did not expect the power of this divine weapon to be so strong. Even though it was corrupted, it was difficult for him to control. So he had to temporarily seal it and wait for a future plan. However, Gul'dan never had the chance to see the soul box again. He followed Orgrim to Azeroth and finally died there. The soul box stayed in the temple until Illidan took control of the temple. In the Alliance, no one except Duque knew what had become of the soul box. Even the Draenei themselves still had an impression of it from 30 years ago. As for Duque's strategy, the strategy was dead. Most of the time, if one did not personally experience it, they would never understand the terror of the enemy and the complexity of the enemy's skills. A huge and illusory cage descended from the sky. Countless souls were wailing and crying. They opened their mouths and used the shrill voice of their souls to tell of the suffering they had endured in life. Hearing these voices, almost every living person felt their scalp go numb. Goosebumps filled every inch of their skin. Soon, the souls began to scream as they were driven by an inexplicable mysterious force, and began to gather. In just 3 seconds, a huge illusory head appeared in everyone's vision. It was surrounded by a large number of crystal prisms, and in the middle was a man's face that looked extremely bitter. It opened its mouth and kept howling in despair. Thrall shuddered. He immediately realized that the first form of the soul box, the source of suffering, had targeted him. Run! Valen's voice suddenly came from afar. Evidently, seeing that the tribe was in a fluster due to the sudden attack, the small team of experts led by Valen chose to intervene directly. Why are you running? Stay. Ghoul Tug sneered and spat out acid again. The corrosive liquid, for some reason, greatly slowed down Thrall's speed. Great Chief! At this time Cain, who had fallen into chaos, came back to his senses. The Ox Chief suddenly rushed over, picked up Thrall, and threw him away like a flying ball. Oh, there was such a thing. Chapter 1477. This was a battle of life and death, and there was nothing that could not be done. The source of suffering, which was as huge as a floating hill, exuded a terrifying wailing aura, while chasing after Sal. At this moment, all the powerhouses felt that the laws were deviating. The world that he was familiar with in the past was leaving him in fear, and an extremely terrifying power of resentment was descending. It was as if a demon king had descended into the world. An irresistible power was dominating everything and taking over the surrounding space. Something touched Imriel's foot, and she subconsciously lowered her head, and found that there were many strange insects crawling out from the cracks of the stone steps of the shrine. They had all mutated after receiving the evil energy and filthy power of the Black Shrine. But now they were fleeing in all directions like crazy. Their survival instincts were driving them away from the source of suffering. Many ghosts that could not be detected by the naked eye began to drift over from all directions. They also wailed and sobbed, and then rushed toward Sal and the others like moths to a flame. If Sal was still a pure warrior, he probably would not even be able to sense these ghosts. But ever since Sal went to Nagrand and obtained the legacy of the shaman, even though he was not proficient in the path of the shaman, he was no longer a warrior, who only knew how to be reckless. After falling to the ground, Sal quickly got up. Ha! A strong electric current circled around his body. The strong electric current produced a subtle magnetic field, causing the pebbles on the steps to spin strangely on the ground. Some of the tiny gravel even floated up and circled around him. He swung the hammer of destruction, and a thick electric snake slithered out, and the power of thunder blasted out. Accompanied by the sound of thunder, the ghosts around him were swept away. Sal could deal with the ghosts, but he could not deal with the terrible power of the source of suffering. This was no longer an ordinary concept of power. This ability to forcibly change the characteristics of the surrounding space was already within the scope of the domain. Be careful. Its strength is no less than a demigod. After Wajin shouted, he was unluckily hit by the source of suffering's soul siphon. Although the power of the soul was no longer as unfamiliar as it was decades ago, the existence of the power of the soul was always difficult to deal with. That kind of soul absorption was even more painful than letting the body bleed. In addition to the pain of being tormented in a sea of flames and blades, he felt more exhaustion and weakness in all aspects. Willen made his move. He immediately removed the soul siphon on Wajin. Golden holy light enveloped Wajin's body, making Wajin's complexion a lot better. Malair attack. Imriel, assist and bless them with protection if necessary. The burly Drenii garrison guard charged forward in a S-shaped stride. According to Duque's strategy, the soul box didn't only have long-range attacks. In close combat, there had to be someone to tank the attacks. Otherwise, if they couldn't vent their anger, they would find trouble with other close combat players. Imriel wielded his weapon as well, but his eyes were constantly scanning his teammates around him so that he could provide support if necessary. At the same time, she also took the time to cast King's Blessing on the powerful warriors of her tribe. Although she seemed reluctant, the Van Cleef father and daughter had already appeared near the chest of souls like phantoms the moment Merid was on top of them. They measured the distance between them and slashed at the chest of souls as far as their daggers could reach. The daggers that had been blessed by the holy light looked full of golden light. It was a beautiful sight. Lilith also followed the strategy in the strategy. She locked onto the soul box from afar and unleashed a rain of arrows. Cao had a slight headache. He had to make a decision. When Duque and William were not present, he was the supreme commander of the Allied forces. Now the team had to face two enemy leaders at the same time. Normally, it would be better to get rid of the theoretically weaker Gurchich bloodbath first. He really didn't want to believe in Duque's strategy every time. A wise leader shouldn't always believe that the spy's intelligence was 100% accurate. But Duque's intelligence was too accurate. Even the leader of the Drenii, Willan, didn't know what form and special abilities the soul box would have after being desecrated and corrupted. But Duque actually knew. Cao had no choice but to believe it. According to the strategy, the soul box would have its second and third forms, all of which had a wide range of domain power. In a situation where the Horde didn't have a real demigod to hold the fort, they had to focus all their firepower before the pressure of the soul box reached its limit. Cao, leave that traitor to us, Orgrim shouted. A few burly but lifeless powerhouses gathered together. They were all chiefs who had died in the first and second battles of the Dark Portal. To Cao, apart from Zuluhid, the others were all unfamiliar to him. They were the kind of people he could only call out by name. Kargith had defected after passing through the Dark Portal, so had Kilrog. There was also Harkin Cranesplitter. Some chiefs had chosen to join the more powerful Burning Legion after resurrecting, while others still used their own methods to uphold the oath they had made when they were alive. Against Gurchich, who had the special ability to make blood boil, sending the Forsaken who had long lost their lives was the best way to deal with him. The only thing that could cause devastating damage to these dead people was damage to the soul. It was obvious that Gurchich didn't have such an ability. In theory, it was a good idea. Cao felt his heart palpitate for no apparent reason. He didn't know why, but he felt a little flustered and absent-minded. Unfortunately, there was no time for Cao to hesitate. I'll leave it to you guys. The rest of you, follow me to deal with the soul box. A leader's duty included making decisions in times of crisis. In order to concentrate their firepower, a total of 5 Forsaken warriors and Death Knights who did not receive any support charged at Gurtig. On the other side, even Anastrian, a powerhouse of the Forsaken, was drawn back to deal with the soul box. Fireballs as hot as the rising sun shot out from the Sun King's hands. Along with the flickering light, the fireballs that were as large as houses pierced through the darkness of the Black Temple and shot towards the soul box. Any souls that were touched by these highly concentrated fire elemental fireballs would explode like smashed watermelons, dissipating into the void. Everyone was focusing their firepower on the first form of the soul box, the source of suffering. From the looks of it, this aggregation of souls had weakened greatly, like a candle in the wind. At this moment, a cold and arrogant voice sounded out of nowhere. Yo, looks like you guys are having a good time when I'm not at home. Chapter 1478. It wasn't until this mysterious voice appeared that the allies who were in the middle of a fierce battle finally realized something was wrong. The air was filled with an evil that was both familiar and unfamiliar to every strong man. It was as if they were suddenly in a different place. They were not in the hall of the Dark Temple of Draenor, but were suddenly pulled into the twisted void. On the square of the Burning Legion's new fortress, The most evil Void Lord stared at everyone with malicious eyes. The feeling of having all their strength and trump cards seen through caused every single expert to be shocked. And the fear in their chests was simply unsuppressible. Thrall felt ashamed because this feeling reminded him of his life as a slave gladiator. He was like a product that could be discarded at any time on the wooden platform, allowing the buyers below to point at him. But in the next second, Thrall quickly calmed down. He carefully looked at the guy who spoke. In this world, it was not the first time he had faced a blind night elf demon hunter. Coupled with the huge bat wings on the back of the newcomer, and the typical pair of demon horns on his forehead, his identity was already 80 to 90% certain. Moreover, a demigod night elf with a pair of crescent moon-shaped weapons that seemed to be burning with green flames. There was only one. Illidan Stormrage, the shameless traitor of Azeroth who had defected to the Burning Legion again and again, and obtained evil power by licking Kill Jaden's boots. Whether it was Thrall or Orgrim, all the hot-blooded orc powerhouses were envious. Without exception, they all hated Illidan. Kill Jaden used a conspiracy to turn the orcs into fell orcs to serve as cannon fodder for the Burning Legion. If Kill Jaden was despicably playing with the orcs, then Illidan was the most cruel culprit in enslaving the orcs. After failing to challenge Arthas, Illidan used a small teleportation portal to escape to the Outland. In the name of regrouping for the next attack on Arthas, he obtained the approval of Kill Jaden and annexed Magtheridon and his subordinates. He magnified the suffering that Magtheridon had inflicted on the orcs countless times. In a few years, when the orcs under Illidan's command expanded to the peak, they claimed to have an army of 1 million. Although it was exaggerated, it was at least 700,000 to 800,000. The price was the deaths of millions of orc civilians. The orc clans that refused to join Illidan were all attacked. The captured orc warriors were forced to drink demon blood, and the old, weak, and disabled were slaughtered. Once upon a time, the orcs slaughtered the Draenei to the point where they could only survive in remote areas with harsh environments such as Zangarmarsh. Illidan did the same to the orcs. Basically, normal orcs could only be found in Nagrand. If it wasn't for the fact that the elemental creatures in the Nagrand area were particularly powerful, and that Illidan was too busy with his mysterious business to personally lead the expedition, there might not even be a single normal orc to be found in this expedition. If it was any other situation, Sardu would have been more than happy to have his army fight Illidan to the death. Not now. The other side had sent out 2 chief-level big shots at the same time, pressuring the powerhouses on this side to the point of suffocation. Not to mention the sudden appearance of the demigod Illidan. Thrall turned his head abruptly and met Wayland's eyes. Both parties nodded in unison. Gruul. Holy light. Punish it. Thrall's ultimate move was to call his underlings. He didn't let the dragon slayer Gruul enter the Black Temple, because his body was too large. Once he entered, the predecessor of the Black Temple, the Temple of Karabaer, which was extremely precious to the Draenei, would no longer exist. Wayland, on the other hand, emitted a bright golden light. He wanted to use all the power of holy light in his body to directly destroy the soul box. He wanted to break the shackles of the soul box in one go. This was not an easy decision to make. But in front of a strong enemy, they had no choice at all. Thrall shouted the call through the magic communication device, and was immediately received by Gruul. For a moment, there was a terrifying roar from far and near outside the temple. Gruul, this terrifying ancient beast, was rushing over at high speed. He was like a King Kong, climbing up from the outer wall of the temple. In just 5 seconds, there was a loud crack on the outer wall closest to the west side of the temple. A crack appeared on the seemingly hard and thick outer wall, and then the crack turned into cobweb-like cracks. In the next moment, the wall exploded, and a strong earthy yellow light shone in from the outside. The building structure of the temple collapsed due to the strong impact. The 30-meter-tall pillars that required at least 3 people to wrap their arms around collapsed like building blocks. The huge floor tiles stacked up layer by layer like broken waves. It was just Gruul's first hit on the wall, but the shock wave caused by the surging force blew many ordinary orc warriors away several times. Some of the unlucky ones were pierced in the neck by sharp stone fragments. When his compatriots tried to cover his fountain of blood, the guy was already finished. It was at this time that Illidan ignored Waylon, who was attacking the soul box with a big move. His figure flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was standing on the back of Gruul's huge left hand. Illidan's action stunned Gruul. The Dragon Slayer shook his huge head and slowly moved his face closer to Illidan. When Gruul noticed that the other party was not afraid at all, he suddenly felt that his dignity was being challenged. Who was he? He was the great lord of the Blade Peak Mountain, the most powerful creature on this planet. Any existence that came to the Blade Peak Mountain would have to take a detour, and pray not to offend his dignity. A mere little thing dared to provoke him? Gruul opened his mouth full of fangs and let out a deafening roar at the little thing. Roar! It was a roar that would make even a giant dragon tremble in fear. In the next moment, Gruul suddenly raised his arm. He wanted to smash Illidan into the top wall of the temple. He could almost see Illidan being smashed into meat paste. However, Illidan only raised his left hand. The slender arm unique to the night elves held against the top wall of the temple out of thin air. This hand seemed to have an invisible magic that could bind the air together, forming a huge and invisible pillar that firmly resisted Gruul's great strength. Gruul's terrifying brute force that could overturn rivers and seas seemed to have hit the ground. No matter how violent his strength was, he could not move Illidan to the top of the temple in the slightest. Illidan's mouth curled into a sneer. A beast that only knows how to use brute force dares to call himself a king. As his voice fell, a dark green light exploded from Illidan's body. Chapter 1479. Gruul's arm suddenly sank. He tried to raise his hand, but it was as if he was locked by a set of invisible heavy shackles, and he could not move at all. Illidan slowly pulled out the pair of famous green blades from behind him, and gently crossed them in front of him. Clang! It was a crisp and sonorous sound. Bright green demonic energy rippled on Azanatha's blades. The pair of divine weapons that were stolen from the Void Lord, and were once again controlled by a Darksider, suddenly resonated cheerfully. The gravel that fell from the broken roof fell on the blades and immediately hit an invisible barrier, refracting and bouncing off. The dazzling demonic light on the blades did not disappear in a flash, but became more and more violent. The dazzling green light seemed to overwhelm all the light in the large temple. As Illidan's fierce aura spread out, everything around him seemed to tremble in the storm. Get out of the way! Thrall finally couldn't help but shout. Get out of the way! How? If it was an agile thief, it would be no problem. Even the burly orc warrior had a decent dodge rate. But Gruul the Dragon Slayer had the size of a hill, and he could only take all the attacks head-on. Along with the sound of the wind being cut, an illusion appeared. It looked like there were countless crescent moons shining with blazing green light flying towards Gruul. Gruul roared. He had just balanced his body and raised his right claw to slap. It was at this moment that a strange dislocation occurred in space. At the last moment, Gruul the Dragon Slayer suddenly tilted his head. As a result, a long green line appeared at the connection between his left shoulder and his body. No! Thrall cried out in the distance. Gruul was a peerless powerhouse that he had spent a lot of money to bring into the tribe. Although this kind of method of relying on outsiders was a bit unreliable, in order to gain more voice in the communication with the Alliance, the existence of a demigod powerhouse was necessary. Even if Gruul was only a demigod and not a real demigod. Now, Gruul was obviously going to suffer a big loss. Because behind Gruul's arm, the extension of the green line could be clearly seen on the thick outer wall of the temple. It wasn't until a full second later that everyone saw Gruul's huge left arm, which was comparable to a train car, fly out. His arm spun in the air for about 5 or 6 times before finally crashing down onto the battlefield below. The arm that was chopped off fell in the middle of a group of tribesmen. Like a landslide, the arm that was half flesh and half rock crushed dozens of tribesmen at the bottom into meat paste. His arm, which had not yet dissipated, was still rolling out, instantly flattening the tribe's formation. Countless warriors of the tribe had their bones broken from the impact, and died on the spot. The tribal warlords who were commanding the battle below stared at this scene dumbfounded. Their impression of Gruul's invincibility collapsed in just a few seconds. This was not the end. When Illidan's dual blades of Azanoth cut off Gruul's arm, suddenly, a rustling sound came from above and below the hall. It was as if something was breaking. No, it was no longer breaking, it was simply collapsing. The people in the fierce battle couldn't help but look back. The half of the temple hall closest to the outer wall suddenly split along the green line that Illidan had cut out. The side that was not connected to the foundation or supporting pillars, along with Gruul, who had lost his balance, fell down with a rumble and instantly fell to the flat ground near the entrance of the temple, causing even more terrifying secondary damage. Gruul was not dead, and his exasperated roar informed them of the fact. It was obvious that Gruul would not be able to participate in the battle in a short period of time. At this moment, everyone finally had a relatively clear understanding of the strength of Illidan, the king of the Outlands. No one present was a match for Illidan. For a moment, the air was dead silent. Illidan's figure flashed at high speed, and with just a few movements similar to a mage's blink, he had already arrived in front of Thrall. He could clearly feel that Thrall, who was holding the hammer of destruction, was trembling slightly. Illidan tilted his head and opened his mouth, which was also full of sharp fangs, to reveal a cruel smile. "Great Chieftain Sar of the Orcs, huh? You're not bad. I'll give you a chance to lead the entire tribe to surrender to me and become my slave. That way, I can forgive your sin of messing around with my fortress." In Thrall's eyes, only Illidan's aggressive purple-blue face and his menacing fangs could be seen. At this moment, he could no longer feel the loss of the dragon slayer Gruul. All he had in his heart now was fear of Illidan's overwhelming strength. But Thrall had never been a timid person. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the leader of the tribe. He took a deep breath into his lungs, used all his strength and roared out. "Orcman will never be slaves." Classic. The reason why it was a classic. It was because the will and belief contained in it could not be replicated. 9 years ago, in the face of the powerful alliance, Thrall led the enslaved orcs to break free from the cage and break the shackles to gain freedom. 9 years later, in the face of Illidan, Thrall still had no reason to betray the freedom of his compatriots. If this hammer fell, Thrall himself might die. But life and death had never been Thrall's first consideration. All he had to do was announce an answer. The answer of yearning for freedom. The flames of the hammer of destruction illuminated half of Illidan's face. The evil face still vaguely retained the outline of the handsome night elf from 10,000 years ago. But at this moment, Thrall's behavior made Illidan feel humiliated. Because Thrall had chosen a difficult path that was the same as his, but the opposite, direct resistance. Then die. The waving Azanatha's dual blades looked like a green circle that kept spinning around Illidan. This circle easily avoided the heavy hammerhead and approached Thrall's neck at a faster speed. At this moment, a huge figure forcibly inserted itself between Thrall and Illidan. Ah! Thrall's eyes widened in shock. In his bell-sized eyes, in his field of vision, the figure that he once lost and once again regained, that incomparably familiar figure was split in half in front of him. Orgrim? No. Chapter 1480. In the original history, Thrall was only the inheritor of Orgrim's will. In this life, Orgrim was more important to Thrall. He was also Thrall's life mentor. When Thrall lost Orgrim for the first time outside the Dalajan city, Thrall was heartbroken and regretted for a long time. Orgrim returned as a dead person, and Thrall was secretly happy for many days and nights. After losing something once, he learned to cherish it more. Because in the entire tribe, only Orgrim understood Thrall's heart the best, and could stand in Thrall's perspective and think for the tribe. And as an orc who was once a great chieftain, his opinions and experience were incomparable. It was not that Wajin was bad, but Wajin was still a troll, and sometimes it was difficult for him to think from an orc's perspective. Now that Orgrim had been slashed by Illidan, how could Thrall not be shocked and pained? But the next moment, Thrall smiled bitterly. "I'm long dead," Orgrim cursed, and while his upper body was still on the ground, he activated Counterattack Storm. This scene was extremely strange. Orgrim, who only had half his body left, actually used his warrior's skills in midair to hit Illidan's hammer a few times. Illidan retreated and held Azanatha's dual blades 10 meters away. With an amused look, he watched Orgrim fall to the ground and continue to jump. At this time, everyone realized that as a Forsaken, as long as the core of his soul was not damaged, It was impossible for Orgrim to die again. If Orgrim did not mind, he could just find a suture line to sew his body back together and continue to fight. Before Thrall could finish his joy, Illidan was unhappy. He spat on the ground. What a filthy and annoying trait. Since you're dead, just obediently become my power. Illidan's left hand put away his weapon into his portal bag, and then his empty palm suddenly stretched forward. A green ball of evil light floated in midair, and the swaying green light reflected the indifferent expression on the self-proclaimed Lord of the Outland. At this moment, the black cloth covering the upper half of his face could no longer hide the empty eye sockets under the black cloth, because the dark green flame of the netherworld was burning in the eye sockets like the flames of the netherworld. A bright light shone through, making Illidan look even more eerie and terrifying. It had to be said that the Van Cleef father and daughter were very brave. When Illidan jumped out, they made the decision to temporarily give up on the soul box and attack Illidan. Unfortunately, they did not succeed. A purple aura enveloped Illidan, causing their blades to bounce away before they could even touch him. One of the 4 members of the Illidari Council, Gathios the Shatterer, who had the skills of a paladin, cast a protection blessing on Illidan, making him temporarily immune to physical damage. The other 4-man party, the Night Elf thief Wireless Deep Shadow, used Shadow Step to get close to Edwin Van Cleef. With a few stabs, he forced old Van Cleef to give up on Illidan and fight Wireless. No one could stop Illidan. The light ball on his left palm was dissipating bit by bit in his palm, before everything around him returned to darkness. Another existence that had been temporarily ignored suddenly erupted. Woo-woo-woo-loo. Following the indistinct wails of the soul box began to flash with a strange radiance. A purplish-black vortex emitting a terrifying aura opened above the soul box. The vortex spun rapidly. At first, no one felt anything wrong. Soon, everyone knew who this vortex was targeting. Ugh! Orgrim, who was still alive, suddenly had his soul leave his body. A green soul that looked exactly like Orgrim flew out of the remaining half of his body, under the absorption of the soul vortex. Before anyone could react, it was sucked into the soul vortex. In less than half a second, everyone realized that the face of the soul box, the source of suffering, had changed into Orgrim's face. The former great chief closed his eyes, opened his mouth full of fangs, and kept roaring in a barbaric orc style. It was an unconscious release of pain, but it transmitted pain, fear, and even more intense emotion, shock, to the entire horde. Thrall turned his neck that was like a rusty machine, and looked at where Orgrim was before. Ashes. And a tragic scene that was very fitting for this description. Orgrim's body was abnormally destroyed. It was as if all the water had been sucked out, and not a trace of weathering was left. Illidan stomped his feet, and in the next second, Orgrim's body was completely blown away like dust swept away by a storm. There was no trace of him at all. No. Sal shouted and couldn't help but shed tears of regret as he wailed. Illidan sneered. There are many orc souls in the soul box. I don't care if there are a few more orc souls. What, are you still not going to surrender? Thrall, this is the last chance for you and your horde. The only thing that answered Illidan was a hammer. It was as if a volcano had suddenly been thrown at them. Illidan's face turned cold. You're asking for it. With a wave of his hand, the demonic spell Dark Barrage shot out. Countless black shadow missiles rained down on the hammer of destruction that was thrown at them. The blazing flames on the hammer's head dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. After the hammer flew for a distance of 3 meters, it was already black and smashed into the ground. From the looks of it, this famous hammer was no different from an ordinary iron. The Horde Masters were angry. They went berserk. They gave up their target and rushed at Illidan. They wanted to tear this evil demon who dared to provoke their great chief and trample on the dignity of the entire horde into pieces. What a pity. The difference in strength could not be made up for with courage. Shadow Impact. This extremely exaggerated shadow attack easily sent all the horde warriors within 100 yards flying. After a while, they fell from the sky like dumplings. Huh. Isn't this our great chief? Gertig yelled as he walked to Thrall, who was lying on the ground. He lifted Thrall up with both hands. Because of the dark energy transformation, His body was even bigger than the already burly thrall. Gurdig looked at Illidan. "My master, you don't mind me torturing him, right?" Illidan nodded mockingly. The power of blood boil entered Thrall's body, and the dizzy Thrall screamed in pain. Imriel, who was holding the soul box, could not help but want to say something. Suddenly, she heard Vanessa's voice. "Calm down. Master is here." Chapter 1481. Shameless bastard. Even if you gain power, you are still scum. Despicable bastard. Let go of your claws. It was a handsome voice. A formless voice could not possibly be described as handsome. But hearing this voice, it naturally reminded people of those handsome men who brought disaster to a country, affected the employment rate of single dogs, and made more girls have unrealistic fantasies. Behind Gurdig, a fiery red figure suddenly jumped out, using his emerald eyes that seemed to be carved out of the finest jade to stare at the rebellious orc. His tone easily reminded people of those holy knights with an excessive sense of justice. Unfortunately, the fire element that surrounded his body was so dense that it was almost tangible, allowing bystanders to understand that this lord had nothing to do with clergy. Then, around this fiery red figure, countless flashing red lights appeared. Those were pieces of rubies that seemed to be the most magnificent ornaments. No, after a closer look, one would be surprised to find that all of the rubies were actually particles of extremely concentrated fire element. Rather than saying they were like rubies, it was more like the feathers of a phoenix. Every sharp feather pointed at Gurdig, the fell orc who was in a crazed state of thirst for power. Undefeatable, Gurdig did not even need to think about it. His instincts told him that this male elf in front of him, who was more beautiful than a woman, was undefeatable. That was not an ordinary powerhouse. It was obvious that this fellow had stepped into the realm of gods. Fighting with such a fellow was stupid in itself. He could not defeat him. Gurdig was indeed cruel and tyrannical, but that was based on the fact that his strength was superior to his opponent. Perhaps he had killed many people, and many enemies that seemed strong. Unfortunately, deep down, he was still that orc laborer full of contradictions. Almost immediately, he wanted to find his own people to take the blame. Unfortunately, there were not that many powerful, his own people, who were free. A dazzling wave of thunder and lightning, like a roaring dragon, suddenly exploded in the temple. A red-haired female Naga with a swaying snake tail, 6 arms, and a standard high elf head appeared. With a single chain lightning, the 4 members of the Illidari Council were forced to jump over the wall. On the other side, a tall and skinny figure appeared, repelling the soul casket with one move. The blazing flames scattered the source of suffering. At this moment, the soul box began to reorganize itself and entered the second stage. Illidan's expression was ugly. His teeth, which were as sharp as a shark's fangs, were grinding against each other. When he saw the face of the person who had suddenly appeared, he could no longer maintain his arrogance, as if he was standing above the clouds and looking down on all living beings. He became more like a mortal. "You," after Illidan's aggressive first note. It was followed by a deflated note that sounded like he was falling off a cliff. Duque had never thought that one day, he would hear a word or a syllable that contained such rich emotions. Originally, Duque wanted to show off a little, and ask Illidan if he would choose to forgive her. He also wanted to compare what Illidan had in common with Mario's Luigi, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teemo, and Guan Yu. She even wanted to sing, "The vast grassland is your love." But when they met, Duque found himself unable to complain, because what he saw was the gentle gaze of an infatuated man. At this moment in Karazhan, Tyrande, who was in Duque's arms, could not help but turn her head and say in a mosquito-like voice, "He knows that Duque's is fake. He also knows that I am watching him." Yes. How could a truly peerless master not see through that the Duque in front of him was just an empty shell? In this life, Illidan did not have the chance to obtain the loyalty of Kael. So the only one who betrayed him was Vashj. However, Illidan didn't look at anyone else. He only looked at the puppet duke, hoping to see the figure of someone he was familiar with from those strange and disgusting eyes. As the brother of Malfurion Stormrage, Illidan's story was too legendary. Before he resolutely left Tyrande's side, his last words were, "No matter what I do, no matter what I become, I will always care about you, Tyrant. If this sentence was used as a love letter, it would probably be very lethal. Unfortunately, in this life, everything was ruined by Duque. The two brothers' fight for Tyrant had stopped because of the ancient war. When they came back to their senses, Tyrant had already been taken by Duque in the name of saving the world when she was captured, and there was no turning back. If Duque was just a despicable and shameless person who took advantage of others when they were weak, then the two brothers might still have a chance. If Tyrant was willing, they probably would not refuse. Unfortunately, Duque played a huge game of infernal affairs. Not only did he foil the Burning Legion's plan to invade Azeroth, but he also blew up Sargera's largest fortress in the Twisted Nether, becoming the greatest hero of all time. It was because of the double conquest of body and mind, as well as the approval of the moon goddess Elun, that Tyrant was determined to keep her chastity for Duque for 10,000 years, and refused any new relationships. As a result, Illidan's secret love could only be a secret love. The first and most beautiful love ended before it even began. Just like in history, if Malfurion had taken Tyrant, perhaps Illidan would have been even angrier. But if Duque had won the first prize, Illidan surprisingly did not find it so hard to accept. At least this was not the double blow of family and love. After all, Duque's performance in that battle was even more outstanding, and he had achieved something that he could only look up to. However, acceptance was acceptance. When it came to the Burning Legion, Illidan had a completely different view. On the other hand, Duque was also quite conflicted. Just by looking at Illidan through the endless nether on the magic mirror screen, Tyrant's emotions were already a little out of control. After saying that, Tyrant fiercely kissed Duque a few times. Duque, if it's possible, and I'm saying if you really have that luxury, please give Illidan redemption. As she said that, Tyrant forcefully squeezed her body against Duque's chest. If it was in the past, feeling the pressure of Mount Hyjal, Duque would have been very happy, and he would be happily revising some 48 moves with Tyrant. But right now, Duque really could not bring himself to be happy. Redemption? This was a phrase that only people who had fallen into evil would use. If Duque remembered correctly, Illidan was playing infernal affairs at this time. Chapter 1482. Illidan had disappeared for so long, even abandoning his base. He must have gone to one of the bases of the Burning Legion, the home planet of the Eridar people, Argus. What was worse was that because Du had already played dirty 10,000 years ago and caused Sargeras to bleed, Illidan wanted to play dirty. It was more than twice as difficult. He didn't know if Illidan had succeeded, but whether he had succeeded or not, and whether he was really playing dirty, Duque could only pretend that he didn't know. Once he was exposed, Illidan, who was probably a good comrade working behind the enemy lines, would be destroyed. Sigh. Duque sighed softly and hugged Tyrant's waist tightly. Their chests were pressed against each other, and they could clearly feel each other's heartbeat. The end of a true fallen is destruction. Only those with kindness in their hearts have hope of salvation. Hearing Duque's words, Tyrant couldn't help but look into the room. From the start of the attack on the Black Temple, Duque had moved Karazhan's command center to the elemental mana pool at the top of the Mage Tower. The mana pool was like a 5-man football field. The elemental emissaries led by Khadgar were monitoring the operation of the magic net, making adjustments from time to time to change the flow and supply of mana. At the side of the field was the command center where Duque and Tyrant were. Although the room was very comfortable, with a desk and a bed to rest on, this was undoubtedly the core of Karazhan's control. All the large mana circuits were located in the command center. From here, Tyrant could see the few elemental emissaries in the elemental pool. Thaddeus, who had been turned into a monster-like construct by the cataclysm, was no longer a living person, but he could still smile and live on as an elemental creature. Sapphiron, the bone dragon that had once brought death and destruction to Azeroth, was now performing his duties gracefully. Black Witch Farina, who had once been a vicious woman, was now obedient like a little wife who would only be bullied, helping Khadgar. There was also Onyxia, the infamous little female dragon, who seemed to have completely accepted her identity as a mount. She was willing to let Duke ride her day and night as if she was in danger. When Duque didn't have time to care about her, She would either stay in her room full of gold coins and sleep soundly, or like now, she would gracefully put up her orchid fingers and gently sip the warm black tea. Of course, the entertainment program that the Black Dragon Princess watched to kill time while drinking tea wasn't anything good. Watching the various creatures that invaded Karazhan through the cracks in space being crushed by the Einherjars of Karazhan was her favorite hobby. Tyron thought of the Kiraji twin emperors who were still at the front lines, Prince Kale, that's who had been labeled a traitor, and Vashj who had recently returned. Tyron suddenly felt a lot better. So many fallen and terrible people had found redemption after meeting Duque. Perhaps Illidan could too. Duque could clearly feel that Tyron's body was no longer tense. The High Priestess was as soft as water when she relaxed. Duque smiled bitterly. Many things were happening in Karazhan, but the Black Temple didn't stop either. Kale, that was able to defeat Gurdig in a single exchange. After all, the mutant fell orc boss' biggest trump card, Blood Boil, was completely ineffective against Kale. That's Boil? My blood has never turned cold, nor has it ever stopped. Kale that's opened his arms, and a fire phoenix rose from his wide red cloak with golden edges. With a clear cry of the phoenix, countless fire feathers rained down on Gurtig, easily making him repent in the purgatory of flames. Gurdig rolled in the sea of fire and pain. He was knocked down, but he didn't die on the spot. The many evil potions that he had drunk had greatly strengthened his body. While his body grew larger, he also had resistance to various elements. This only increased his pain. Just 2 meters away, Thrall watched silently as Gurdig walked towards death, but didn't try to stop him. Every true orc would despise this guy who had blasphemed the bravery of the orcs and blasphemed the most precious tradition. The soul box fell into silence. Perhaps it would enter the second stage in a minute or two. At this point in time, the battle stopped. Illidan didn't move. The 4 members of the Illidari Council were being suppressed by Vashj, but after Kale, that's took care of them, Vashj didn't attack the 4 ruthlessly. The 4 used to be Kaizi's subordinates. Gathios the Shatterer, Zarever the high-level mage, Duchess Mayland, and Weirless Deep Shadow. When Kale that's appeared in front of them again in a tyrannical manner, their faces didn't look good. Originally, the Illidari Council was established by Kale. That's the role of the council was to manage the Black Temple for Illidan and deal with the various daily affairs of the Black Temple. This included Gathios was responsible for the food supply of the Fel Orcs in the Black Temple. Zarever was responsible for the magical energy supply of the Blood Elves in the Forbidden Palace. Mayland was responsible for the management of the demons in the Black Temple. In this life, because of Duque's intervention, Kaizi's fate took a turn. He was no longer the Blood Elf prince who betrayed the alliance. In addition, Kaizi had long been exiled to the Dalajan, so his demonic addiction was the least. In this life he came to the Outland as an alliance expeditionary force. When his demonic addiction was at its most severe, Kaizi used a method of letting it go. The most severely addicted went to Shatrath City to become an astrologer. The most physically addicted ran to Illidan, begging for the power of dark energy to satisfy the emptiness of their body and mind. Using dark energy to satisfy their demonic addiction was like drinking poison to quench their thirst. But these blood elves couldn't control themselves at all, so they could only bite the bullet and agree. As fate would have it, in the end, it was because of these 4 that they were chosen as members of the Illidari Council. Illidan had also suspected that the Illidari Council's role was to play spy on Kaizi, to have these guys come to spy on him and report his every move to Kale. But regardless of whether these Blood Elves' defection was Kale, that's conspiracy, or an arrangement with ulterior motives, the conceited Illidan didn't care. He never took these Blood Elves seriously. If he wanted to, he could destroy Kale. That's in his entire Blood Elf race at any time. Moreover, he really had no one around him that he could use. Interestingly, at this moment, when the 4 of them saw their former master, their awkward expressions showed that they had really come to seek refuge with Illidan. Chapter 1483. If Kale, that was still the half-baked commander who had lost contact with his home planet, and was in an awkward position, and could not solve his subordinate's demon addiction, then Illidari and the others could just abandon Kale. That's Aside from good and evil, this was a typical example of people going to higher places. But now Kaizi had the aura of a king returning. It was obvious that Kale, had used some way to temporarily merge his mount, the phoenix named Ao, into his body, and obtained most of the power of this phoenix that had just entered adulthood. Compared to the dragon slayer Gruul, this was also a demigod body, even if there was a time limit. Under normal circumstances, Kale, should not have played his trump card so early. However, the alliance's cards were stronger. Vashj, recognized as the strongest among Illidan's subordinates. This wasn't a matter of selection, but a matter of fighting. When Illidan was in control of the Outland, Vashj, Magtheridon, and Mother Shiraz all seemed to be in this position. Vashj defeated 2 other strong people before she proudly ascended to that position. No one thought that Illidan's strongest force would betray him just like that. And it was the most thorough kind. He and his subordinates rebelled together. When Illidari and the others heard the news, they were so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. Especially when they saw Vashj use their water pump to pour water into the Moon Shadow Valley and drown a part of the Black Temple. The 4 of them almost collapsed. They did not know if it was lucky or not, but just when the 4 of them thought that the Black Temple could not hold on, Illidan rushed back. This kind of twists and turns was too much for the eyes to take in. On one side was the powerful Illidan. On the other side was the even more mysterious weave demigod Duke Marcus. No one knew who the winner would be. Almost as soon as Kale, appeared, Illidan felt the 4 of them waver. Illidan sneered, but did not say it out loud. In his eyes, the deciding factor was always the small group with the strongest power. As long as the final winner was him, then all problems would be solved. He needed to use the Illidari Council to do chores for him. And he also needed to make the 4 of them think that he still trusted him. Although the lack of absolute loyalty from the 4 of them made him a little uncomfortable. So what? After being in the Burning Legion for so long, he no longer believed in the concept of loyalty. As long as he had the strength, even the most ferocious demon would obey his orders. It was because of this that he allowed the council to continue to exist, which was filled with inner conflicts. However, he was very interested in what would happen to these 4 fellows who were the chess pieces of both sides. Perhaps only the goddess of destiny herself knew. After a short confrontation and awkward silence, Illidan grinned as if he was laughing. "Duke Marcus, you're quite famous. What, you want to beat me?" Illidan storm-rage, "with just this doll you brought?" Being mocked by Illidan, Duque was not angry at all. He did not expect Mark Dooku, who had limited mana output, to defeat Illidan. Facing me is better than facing Tyrant or Malfurion, isn't it? Duque's words deeply provoked Illidan. One could clearly see the muscles on this legendary figure's face slightly trembling. Duque added, "Furthermore, you're underestimating the Alliance's strength." Mark Dooku opened his arms. Beside him, 2 giants as tall as towers immediately took a step forward. The Courage Twin Emperors, genuine demigods who could exert demigod-level combat power with the support of the magic net. They stood 5 steps away from Duke on the left and right. Kale that's turned into a ball of flame and appeared on Duque's left in a flash. Vashj smiled charmingly, swaying her snake tail in a beautiful rhythm, and stood on Duque's right side. You could say that Duque was arrogant, but you could also say that Duque was showing off. "I'm just a little brother, strong and numerous, with 4 demigod subordinates. Do you have that?" Although the twin emperors were more dependent on the weave, Vashj and Kaizi were strong people independent of the weave. Duque's face was full of anger, and even a little arrogant. "Call your master, kill Jaden over, or you'll lose." Duque had such a confident expression on his face. This was not a simple bluff. This was a gamble based on the current situation, and the risk was not high. If the Eridar Gemini's intelligence and history were correct, Kill Jaden was no longer in the twisting nether and sneaking into Azeroth. Otherwise, Illidan would not have had the chance to sneak into Argus to cause trouble. On the surface, Kill Jaden, who was Illidan's boss, could not appear, so the upper limit of the combat power of the next battle would only be limited to demigod level. In other words, if Duque did not come in person, Kill Jaden would not appear. Illidan had just finished causing trouble, and he was also feeling guilty. Of course, he would not put down his pride and send a distress signal to the twisting nether. At this moment, Illidan still did not know that he had already been taken advantage of by Duque. Glancing around, Illidan frowned. For a grand battle, this place is too small. Come to my training field. After saying that, he did not care about how Duque would respond. He flapped the demonic wings behind him, and his huge body flew up like an arrow. Boom, boom, boom. He completely ignored the thick roof of the temple, and with his demigod body, he brutally broke through layer after layer, rushing straight to the platform at the highest level of the Black Temple. The twin emperors were the first to follow, and on their backs, 2 pairs of cicada-like wings grew just like that. They also followed with incomparable violence, breaking through the roof walls and going up. The Drenii garrison officer Mao, Raid's eyes were twitching, but in the end he did not say anything. The Drenii could not beat the enemy and lost their lair. If the enemy helped them get it back, they could not guarantee that they would come back intact. I'll go first. Vashti greeted Duque, tilted her head slightly, and licked her flame-like red lips with her nimble little tongue. This was a secret signal that only she and Duque understood. Duque waved his hand in annoyance, sending her away first. Vashti chuckled and summoned a thick water column. It followed the big hole that the demon king Vec, Lore had broken through, and under the impact of the water column, it flew up. There was only Kale, that's left on the scene. The Blood Elf Prince was a little hesitant. Instead, it was Duque who spoke first. He crossed his arms over his chest and said with a slightly contemptuous tone, "The 4 of you can forget about it. There is no point in continuing to fight. Illidan will not believe in your loyalty even if you fight. If you stop and reduce our troubles, at least after we win, I will spare you once for Kale, that's sake. Remember, your fate is only decided by the victor." Chapter 1484. Duque's words definitely hit the nail on the head. In the original version of history, the Allied forces attacked the Darkness Temple after defeating Vashti and Kale. That's Illidari and the others, who thought that they had lost their master, chose to stand on Illidan's side and fight the Allied forces to the death. However, Kale Vats, the master that they had sworn loyalty to, was standing here, and they had only turned to Illidan because they couldn't resist the demon addiction. With the amnesty of Duque, the #1 person in the alliance, it would be a lie if they didn't feel relieved. Kale, that's also let out a long sigh of relief. "Duque, thank you. Kaizi in this life was good at everything, except that he was too soft-hearted." Duque waved his hand, and Kaizi immediately understood. His private mount, Phoenix, immediately jumped out, chirped happily, and rushed straight up with Kaizi on its back. On the other side, the soul box seemed to have completed its transformation. It had entered the second stage, the source of desire. Duque looked around and said, "Thrall Willen, I'll leave this to you." Thrall had already stood up, and his face was very dark. If the soul box was just an enemy that could be fought or not fought before, it had now become a target that Thrall and the entire horde had to defeat. Whether it was out of brotherly love or the principle of the shaman doctrine of souls returning to the earth, Thrall and the horde couldn't let Orgrim's soul suffer in the soul box. Thrall also realized that such a powerful Illidan wasn't something that the horde could deal with. Focusing on dealing with the soul box was what the horde could do now. Thrall nodded heavily in response to Duque's words. Duque, who was in Karazhan, peeked at the situation on the other side. The shadow of Akuma was easy to deal with. Now Varian was leading the Alliance's horde to fight the 6-armed demon matriarch Shiraz. It could be said that the battles in all parts of the Darkness Temple were at a stalemate. In the temple, Duque raised his hand, and a winged figure suddenly appeared. She was Shatura, the head of the Zerg in the Outland. Duque lifted his chin at the 4 of them and waved the things in his hand. They were a few bottles of high-purity Sunwell water. This scene caused the breathing of the 4 people to quicken. While dark energy could temporarily alleviate the demon addiction, but how could the dark energy that was converted from the souls of the earth be as pure and efficient as the water from the Sunwell? Duque smiled. "My promise is valid. As long as you don't help each other before we decide who's the winner between us and Illidan. The Alliance will accept you again, and they will not hold it against you for defecting to Illidan. Remember, Illidan's last name is Stormrage. Blood brothers, broken bones, connected tendons. Back then, Illidan had courted death in front of the night elves and deserved to be executed. But in the end, Malfurion still used his influence to sentence Illidan to life imprisonment. Just because Illidan was Malfurion's brother and Tyron's unlucky childhood friend, Duque could not kill Illidan. Moreover, as a transmigrator, Duque knew that Illidan's heart was in the enemy camp, and it was very likely that he was the legendary son of light and darkness. After intimidating the four people for a while, the four people silently took a few steps back and stood a certain distance away from Shachula. Duque nodded, and then he flashed to the top of the temple. Blink could not flash into the air, but the floors of the temple were the best stepping stones. When Duque arrived at the highest floor, he was shocked to find that Illidan was King unparalleled. The twin blades of Asenath, the symbol of the ugly original sin, were spewing the flames of hell, and the green dark energy was dazzling. This was clearly more than two. On the other hand, on Duque's side, after watching for a few seconds, Duque only had one sentence to say. What a shame, let's leave the group. Illidan was unparalleled, and Duque's side had 3.5 demigods, and they were actually beaten like dogs. Illidan's high agility and speed was one reason, but more importantly, the four of them seriously lacked coordination. The attack speed of the Sword Sovereign's Kiraji Emperor sword was too slow. This was not a game where one would forcefully lose HP. Originally, the Sword Sovereign's swordsmanship was barely acceptable, but in front of a fierce person like Illidan, it was nothing. Thinking about it, Queen Sylvan could dodge in front of him, so naturally, Illidan could too. After discovering that the twin emperors had the same HP, Illidan did not even bother with the Demon Sovereign. After all, Illidan was better at swordsmanship than his magic. And although the Demon Sovereign was proficient in all types of magic, the power of each type of magic attack was limited, and Illidan directly used shadow magic to fight him. On the other hand, Kale that's used the Sword Sovereign's magic immunity to fiercely throw fireballs, almost turning half of the platform into a sea of fire. In the sky were rolling dark clouds, and on the ground was a sea of fire that seemed to burn to the horizon. It was nice to watch, but it was useless. As long as he was not a demigod, the power of Kai Zi's elemental magic could not improve in quality. The gap between mortals and gods was not so easy to bridge. Moreover, the guys in the Burning Legion were really not afraid of fire. Dark energy itself was one of the most terrifying flames in the world. After Illidan took 2 tentative pyroblasts from Kai Zi, he smiled contemptuously and ignored Kai Zi. When a mage reached Breaking Dawn, they already had many life-saving skills. They could not confine a Breaking Dawn mage's power source in the elemental domain, and it would take a long time to chase a Breaking Dawn. So Illidan played the elimination game with Kai Zi. Being hated by the enemy was also a kind of honor, but being ignored by the enemy was a shame. At least Kale, that's had experienced so many ups and downs, and his mentality was more mature and steady. He did not really rush to play melee mage with Illidan head-on, and turned to support Vashj. This was because Vashj, who was more comprehensive, was the one who was the real threat to Illidan. Her nature element thunder magic not only covered a wide range, but the electric shock also had paralysis and deceleration effects. This was definitely a big threat to Illidan, who relied on agility, and Vashj's superb archery skills. Sound arrows, silent arrows, invisible arrows, curved trajectory, straight-line explosive shots, attacks that were calculated with precise shooting trajectories would sometimes suddenly form a situation similar to a fatal blow. Several times she almost hit Illidan's vital points, and his scalp went numb on the spot. Almost every time he narrowly dodged it. Illidan could be considered ruthless. What Duque saw when he came up was Illidan directly summoning a large group of Shadowlings to entangle the other 3 powerhouses, and taking the opportunity to attack Vashj. It was true that Vashj had 6 arms, and after 10,000 years of training, her 6 arms were extremely coordinated. 2 longswords, 2 daggers, and a staff danced up and down almost airtight. Even with Illidan's crazy attacks, Vashj was not at a disadvantage in melee combat. Vashj was at a disadvantage because of Illidan's dark energy. Illidan's entire body turned into a green sun, brutally burning everything within 10 meters of his body. Chapter 1485. Sacrifice. By burning one's own mana, it burns everything around it regardless of friend or foe. Combined with mana burn, it is the nemesis of all spellcasters. Coupled with the high dodge rate brought by high agility, Illidan relied on this combo to dominate the world 10,000 years ago when he was still a moon guard and fought against the Burning Legion in the ancient war. No one knew how many demons stronger than Illidan died because of this. Even his twin blades of Azzinoth were taken back like this. Vash's six-armed combat style could be said to be no weaker than any melee combatant, but unfortunately, she was facing Illidan. Vash's net of daggers and swords was rarely able to hit Illidan, and even if it did, it would be blocked by the two swords. On the other hand, Vash was constantly being burned by sacrifice, mana burn, shadow barrage, soul absorption, and other shadow attribute attacks. Even if Vash had a demigod body, this was still not the way to go. The Sword King killed the shadow demon and rushed over to help. His movements were slower, and it looked like he was more of a hindrance. If Kai'Zi hadn't given Vash an effect similar to blazing haste, which greatly increased Vash's movement speed for a short period of time, perhaps Vash's situation would be even worse. Traitor! You shall die here. Illidan opened his big mouth with shark teeth and grinned. Traitor? Ha! Do you remember what I said to you when I first joined you? Since you are so strong, before a stronger guy appears, I will serve you. Now that my master has returned, I will naturally return to serve my master. By the way, during the ancient war 10,000 years ago, I offered my loyalty to my master, Mark Dooku, who is now Duke Marcus in the palace of Azhara. Vash said with a smile. There was a fundamental difference between serving and loyalty. When Illidan took Vash as his subordinate, he didn't think so much with the idea of I should be the best in the world. He never thought that Vash would have a master. Vash didn't mention Tyrande at all, but how could Illidan not think of the mess between Duke and Tyrande in Azhara? This made Illidan even angrier. On this side, Vash was clearly at a disadvantage, but her face was still fearless. Her 6 hands continuously launched counterattacks, and from time to time, she would use thunder magic to shock Illidan. Her attitude of absolute reliance made Illidan even more angry. Aha! Are you still waiting for your master to save you? No chance. He's a coward who doesn't dare to run out of his wizard tower. Illidan roared, his voice almost breaking Vash's eardrums. Illidan's shout made the 3.5 demigods present a little angry, but also a little helpless. Illidan had already used his tyrannical strength to show his dominance as a leader, but what about their boss? Because he was restrained by Kil'jaeden, he could not come to Draenor personally. In the beginning, they had hoped to defeat Illidan to prove themselves, but after a short period of failure, their mentality had changed subtly. King against king, general against general. This idea of Azeroth, which had been an iron law since ancient times, began to spread uncontrollably in their minds. Why can't our boss Duke appear? In fact, it was not just them. There was actually a very, very faintly discernible will secretly scanning here every once in a while. At this moment, a leisurely and absolutely confident voice sounded. Illidan, you think too highly of yourself if you want my main body to act. However, it's not impossible to let you see the mighty power of a demigod of the weave. Duke. The one who spoke was the puppet, Mark Dooku, who had come to the platform and was directly controlled by Duke. In Karazhan, Tyrande suddenly hugged the rising Duque. She was so nervous that tears could clearly be seen at the corner of her eyes. No. You can't go directly. Kil'jaeden is watching you. As soon as your soul enters Draenor, you'll fall into his trap. Duque smiled gently and gently stroked Tyrande's hair. You're not a wizard, so you don't understand. In fact, I don't necessarily have to personally participate in order for an empty puppet to have demigod-level combat power. Behind the humanoid puppet, a colorful portal opened up. An existence with extremely strong elemental fluctuations stepped out of the portal and came in front of Illidan, Vash, and the other powerhouses. However, his appearance caused all the powerhouses to be dumbfounded. The existence in front of them with a translucent soul was definitely not Duque. However, the powerhouses on Duque's side were not unfamiliar with the newcomer. Khadgar. Yes. The person who had come was the great director of the weave, the originally incomparably powerful great wizard of three virtues, Khadgar. The current Khadgar was just a standard elemental creature. His appearance made Kale, that's instantly understand what Duque was doing. The magic circuit was rooted in the soul, and it was a magic system that produced and controlled magic power. To let an empty soul have powerful magic power, not only did it need a tough and incomparably compatible body, but it also needed the soul of a powerful wizard. Duque could not put in his soul, but it did not mean that he could not use other souls. As soon as Khadgar appeared, he took large strides and directly turned his entire elemental body illusory, entering Mark Dooku's body. Then Mark Khadgar opened his arms and shouted to the sky, "I Khadgar, open my soul to my lord. The will of my lord is my will." With a burst of purplish-blue arcane light shining in front of everyone, in less than half a second, the Duque that appeared in front of everyone became real. In just an instant, whether it was the phoenix flames that spread almost the entire platform, or the evil sacrificial fire that burned everything within a 10-meter radius with Illidan as the center, all disappeared without a trace. The scenery in their field of vision did not change, but in the perception of the powerhouses, what appeared in front of them was an extremely quiet elemental world. The violent fire elemental was as still as water. The surging frost elemental was resting quietly, and the reverberating natural elemental elements circulated themselves according to this world's unchanging rhythm for thousands of years. All the elemental elements seemed so quiet and serene. No one could imagine that just a moment ago, there was a magic war that involved the divine realm. Only the top magic powerhouses could feel the sea of magic. 12 bright moons lit up in the void. These moons were actually the 12 nodes of the weave. They calmly provided elemental power from the entire world of Draenor to the existence at the center of the nodes. Duque opened his eyes, and his pupils were clear. "Come, Illidan." Chapter 1486. It was hard to describe what this so-called Duque in front of him was. An empty shell constructed with magic as the core. The soul of a super mage who was supposed to carry the destiny of history, but became an elemental life form, and the control of a real demigod behind the scenes. Illidan looked at this Duque with mixed feelings. He felt like he was being fooled, but he couldn't tell what Duque had fooled him about. As for where Kil'jaeden had gone, Illidan had a vague guess. What Duke was doing now was fulfilling his duty to protect Azeroth. He had done it to the best of his ability. It was just that no one thought that there would be such an operation. Duque raised his left hand horizontally and gently grasped. A very ordinary brownish-red wooden staff suddenly appeared in his left hand's palm. It had a drumstick-shaped head and a simple belt. Just by looking at its appearance, no one would associate this quaint-looking staff with the legendary Azeroth's strongest staff. But when 3 ethereal crows appeared on the head of the staff and cawed, Illidan felt as if his fate had been disrupted by these crows. Duque spoke. His voice was low and full of a sense of history. "This is Atish, the legendary staff of the Guardian. The former Guardian of Azeroth, Medivh, self-destructed this artifact staff as the price to send Sargera's soul into the bottomless abyss. After that, I spent 23 years and finally collected all 42 pieces of it from the hands of Kel Thuzad and Si Thun, and rebuilt this staff." Duque opened his right hand, and pulled out another weapon from the void. When he pulled out his wrist from the void, circles of golden ripples appeared in midair. What he took out was a glittering holy sword. The sword was extremely slender, and the blade was less than a finger's width. The body of the sword was constantly twisting upwards, like a spiral cone. The hilt of the sword seemed to have added a pair of shining angel wings for the sake of beauty. Compared to the seemingly ancient staff in Duque's left hand, the blade of this holy sword was as clean as new, as if it had just been quenched and forged in a blacksmith shop. But when Illidan saw it, he immediately trembled. It wasn't that the sword was too new, but that the holy aura that bloomed from it was so strong that not even the slightest bit of filth could accumulate on it. This holy sword obviously represented absolute purification. Duque's voice became lower and lower, but in Illidan's ears, every word was shocking. It was thought-provoking. This sword originated from Quel'Thalam, an unnamed product after the original Great Sage sword was split. It used to have an unreliable name. However, after I used it to kill the Demon King Sargeras, the Lich King Nazul, the Flame Lord Ragnaros, the Black Dragon Prince Nefarian, the Defiler Archimond, and the ancient god Sethun, I prefer to call it Duke Marcus Demon Slayer. Every time Duque said a name, he took a step forward. Each step was heavier and more shocking than the last. The holy sword did not kill the nameless. It was precisely because every name that fell on this holy sword once represented an earth-shattering feat, that the weight of the sword was unimaginably heavy. For a moment, Illidan couldn't control himself, and even forgot to breathe. These names, small ones were famous, big ones resounded throughout the universe. Compared to them, who was Illidan? Illidan more or less knew about Duque's achievements, but when Duque carefully listed them, he clearly felt the pressure in his heart was as heavy as a mountain. Crack. That was the sound of Illidan gritting his shark teeth hard. He didn't know when, but the tip of his left foot that was originally stepping forward moved back by a centimeter. He noticed this at once. This discovery made him ashamed on the spot, because this proved that he was afraid. In front of Duque, all his efforts seemed to be in vain, and all his achievements seemed to be child's play. When Duque blew up the twisting nether in the War of the Ancients, he was an immature spy. When Duque almost destroyed all the Burning Legion leaders, he was still killed Jaden's lackey. Without comparison, there would be no harm. Duque's glory was a reflection of his failure. Illidan's muscles swelled to the extreme, and the two blades in his hands trembled, because he was clenching them too tightly. Illidan was at a loss. At this moment in Karazhan, Jaina rubbed her eyebrows. Hey, Duque, although you've beaten up so many powerful big guys, I remember that when you stabbed the Mediv possessed by Sargeras to death, you didn't have this holy sword, right? Duque righteously spouted nonsense. When it comes to aura, as long as you can overwhelm the opponent, it's a success. When it comes to battle results, it doesn't matter if I believe it or not. As long as the opponent believes it and is terrified, then everything is fine. Tyrande, who had been in a state of anxiety, slapped her forehead. Am I stupid to be so worried about you and Illidan? A little. Before Duque could finish, he was glared at by Aurelia, and Duque decisively swallowed the second half of his sarcastic words. In fact, was it wrong for Duque to use his aura to suppress others? Absolutely not. If he could overwhelm the opponent with his aura before the battle, it would shake the opponent's confidence. In a battle like this where the difference in levels was not too far apart, it was the best opportunity. Duque's words were 70% true and 30% false. He was bluffing that Illidan was not well informed. The miserable Illidan had been imprisoned for 10,000 years, and not long after he was released, he jumped ship to the Burning Legion. Then he was forced by Kill Jaden to run to Northrend to fight against Arthas. At this point in time, it was after Duque led the allied army to kill Archimond. Many things, even if Kill Jaden kept his mouth shut, there would always be talkative demons who knew about Duque's crazy battle results. Under the spread of false information, Duque's battle results had long been exaggerated many times over. There were two things that were absolutely certain. Duque had personally killed Sargeras and Archimond. Regardless of whether these two could be resurrected in the future, at least everyone knew that Duque had beaten the Burning Legion until only Kill Jaden was left out of the three. Because of this, Illidan was so afraid of Duque. The wind from the Black Temple blew over, but it was all swept away by the elements around Duque's body that were so dense that they were almost solid. The corner of Duque's mouth rose. He knew that the time had come. Blindly exerting fear would instead arouse Illidan's blood. It was time to set the pace again. Oh yes, I forgot to tell you. After that kid Arthas became a Death Knight, he saw me twice. One time he broke an arm, and the other time he was cut in half. I heard that you were beaten up badly by that kid. I hope you don't disappoint me too much. If you're not even as good as him. Chapter 1487. Duque's words were heard by the girls watching in Karazhan, and Jaina rolled her eyes. Although Duke's words didn't explicitly state that he was the culprit behind both of Earthes' deaths, it was clear that he was leading Earthes in that direction. Tyrande was surprised at first, and then smiled bitterly. She rested her chin on one hand and rubbed her eyebrows with the other, thinking, Illidan is a veteran who has lived for more than 10,000 years. Unfortunately, in terms of strategy and tactics, he will not be able to catch up to Duque even if he practiced for another 10,000 years. Aurelia shrugged. She knew. Duque was good at borrowing power and accumulating his own advantages. There was no way to interrupt Duque at the beginning, and like a rolling snowball, Duque became the behemoth he was now. Who would have thought that at the beginning, Duque was just a little guy with a bit of strange ability? Now he was almost the hope of the entire Azeroth. When Duque mentioned Arthas, it was like slapping Illidan in the face. His face, which had turned dark and green because of his dark powers, became very interesting. Is that all you can do? Illidan said fiercely. Oh, Duque laughed. He raised his left hand that was holding the staff and swung it horizontally, his palm slightly upward, and hooked his index finger at Illidan. Then come, it's just you and me. My men will not attack you. The twin emperors, Kaizi and Vashj, all stepped back, giving enough space for the two bosses to fight. Illidan's eyelids twitched. To be honest, if Duque came with his luxurious lineup, he would really have a headache. Just now, he could beat these four guys because they lacked coordination. And the key was that they lacked a true core. Once Duque appeared, then these four guys would undoubtedly all follow Duque's lead. The combat power of a demigod could be fully released. Just dealing with Duque alone was naturally more ideal in terms of tactics. Unfortunately, knowing that his opponent was just a puppet, Illidan had a feeling that he would lose regardless of whether he won or not. Indeed, Duque's main body could not descend, but it did not mean that Duque could not create a new puppet mage. Illidan really did not understand what kind of existence the demigod of the Weave was. Illidan shook his head and forced the distracting thoughts out of his mind. No matter what the result was, he could only fight. Otherwise, his foundation would be completely destroyed. Umph. With a cold snort, Illidan's huge body suddenly disappeared. He did not use the demonic spells that he was very familiar with. The other party was obviously an existence that had reached the pinnacle of elemental mastery. Blindly bombarding him with magic might not be able to gain the upper hand. Illidan brandished Azanatha's dual blades and attacked. There were no feints, no probing, only absolute speed. It was so fast that the naked eye could not catch it. It was unimaginably fast. It reminded people of the countless times in the ancient war when Illidan charged past quickly. Every demonic movement was frozen, and then purplish-blue blood sprayed out from the vital points. When Duque realized that Illidan had gone behind him, and was about to slash him from behind, there was a moment when Duque thought that he was in trouble. Illidan was fast, but the reaction of the system elf was even faster. It was completely beyond the limits of what Duque could react to. The system had already activated its own defense. Woo! The elements that were extremely calm a moment ago seemed to be stretched in the space according to Duque's will. The terrifying cold light that suddenly shot out reminded every powerhouse of a weapon, and they felt a bone-chilling coldness from their bones straight to their heart. Illidan instantly judged that if he rushed in without a care, the chill would climb up his body in the next moment, and then instantly freeze, and then form a thick layer of ice, sealing his movements. Element frost. Illidan's expression suddenly changed, and his body that had been greatly strengthened by his dark powers made an unimaginable move. In the blink of an eye, his huge body that was charging forward suddenly did a backflip. His feet, which had turned into hooves due to his dark powers, kicked the air, and with the help of the two balls of dark flames that appeared out of thin air, he completely changed his direction and somersaulted 3 times in the direction of where he came from, and flew backward. He used too much force, and when he retreated, his hooves plowed 2 fist-deep marks on the solid floor of the temple. It was only then that Duque slowly turned his body, and turned his head to look at Illidan, with a winner's mocking smile on his face. He had pretty fast reflexes. Illidan's face alternated between green and red. Compared to Duque's methods, his attack just now was like a clown. This was like a duel between 2 people. One of them used a sword dance to create 81 sword flowers, and it looked very beautiful, but who knew that he would be defeated by the other in one move? It was really embarrassing to the Twisted Nether. While the girls in Karazhan were amazed, Only Jaina was a little puzzled. Why do I feel like you were the one who didn't react just now? Smack. Duke's slap landed on Jaina's perky buttocks, causing Jaina to yelp in shock. She covered her buttocks and jumped up shyly. Who asked you to talk? Believe it or not, I'll go wow you later. Of course, outsiders would not know that Duke really didn't react, and only felt that his boss's level was off the charts. Gas, who was standing 50 meters away, had her beautiful eyes flashing. Her flushed face made people wonder if she had some crooked thoughts in her mind just now, and she was having a good time. On the other side, just a test had made Illidan's heart sink. He only felt that Duke Marcus had defeated so many peerless masters, and he really lived up to his name. Tisk. Illidan spat. He was not willing to accept it. He absolutely did not believe that a demigod who had not even descended could have such terrifying strength. This puppet wearing the skin of Duke Marcus, with an incompatible soul as its core, must have some weakness. Illidan moved again, this time faster. He ran around Duque, maintaining a distance of at least 10 meters. His speed was so fast that he actually left a blurry shadow on the outer ring. No one could sense his specific location. Only the heavy tread of the demon's hooves on the stone floor could be heard. Sacrifice. Mana burn. The combo that had never failed before was used again. But it was useless. A group of elements rose up in front of Duque's left, looking like a mushroom cloud that had shrunk to the size of a palm. It was obvious that the elements there had all been stimulated and exploded out of control. However, this group of elements was at least 2 meters away from Duque. The smile on the corner of Duque's mouth became clearer. Chapter 1488. Illidan's mana burn sounded very powerful. With a small amount of magic power, he could cause chaos in the opponent's magic circuit and cause damage. In fact, this was a high-level upgraded version of the mage's mana seal. The difference between the two was that the mana seal would only cause temporary chaos in the opponent's magic and prevent them from casting spells. On the other hand, mana burn would inject more chaotic magic power into the opponent's body, focusing on causing all the magic power in the opponent's circuit to overload, or even cause the circuit to explode, destroying the opponent's magic storage and damaging the opponent's circuit. Since Duque had been plotting against Illidan for so long, how could he not guard against Illidan's move? Even if Illidan had long been in his demon form and seemed to have forgotten his signature skill, Duque would never forget it. Moreover, Vashj and the others had already gone up to test the waters. According to the results, Duque was even more certain. Therefore, in the surrounding void, Duque had already set up a series of magic loops similar to magic circuits. On the surface, these loops were an extension of his personal magic circuit. They were tactile and control lines, but in fact they were not directly related to the magic circuit he had now. They were purely used to prevent Illidan's mana burn. Until now, the feeling of failure was displayed so clearly in front of the arrogant Illidan for the first time. In every battle he fought in his life, he could calmly control the life and death of others. But at this moment, he finally understood that when his best attack method was mercilessly suppressed, the weaker party was as weak as a drowning person who was bound by the goddess of fate, and then mercilessly thrown into the sea to wait to drown. That was the deepest sorrow. The move that he was most proud of since his debut had been completely destroyed, and his desire and confidence for victory had been mercilessly trampled. His heart finally showed signs of being unable to bear it. Before, he thought that as a new demigod, Duque often relied on the help of strong people to achieve such achievements. In terms of strength and status, he was only on the same level as him. If that was the case, of course, he could use all kinds of methods to give Duque a show of strength. But now, not only did he realize that he had failed to put on a show of strength, but he had also made a grave mistake. That wasn't some newly ascended demigod at all. Nor was it a lucky person who had forcefully stepped into the divine territory by relying on his powerful physical body or some other special trait. Instead, it was a terrifying existence who had already grasped the core meaning of the divine territory. No, once Duque was able to become one with heaven and earth, he would be able to use the power of the planet endlessly. Even if the amount of power Duque could use was limited, he would still be an absolute existence that was about to step into the realm of true gods. Duque gently propped Atish on the ground and smiled. Yo Illidan. If you have any other moves, hurry up and use them. I'm looking forward to the power you'll gain after joining Kil'jaeden. Next would be Dark Bullet Screen? Soul Extraction? Fire Explosion? Or Flame of Pain? Duque counted Illidan's moves one by one. Every time he counted one, Illidan's face darkened. If his trump card was known by the enemy, how could it still be called a trump card? He didn't know when, but the psychological pressure that Duque put on him was getting bigger and bigger. Duque took 3 steps towards Illidan. Illidan, although I'm not in a hurry, I advise you to move faster. Otherwise, as the commander of the Alliance, sometimes it's not good for me to fight with the people below me. Fight for what? Of course, it was to kill. Duque gently raised his left hand, and at this moment, the battle scenes throughout the Black Temple were unreservedly displayed in front of Illidan. On the periphery, the Alliance and Horde soldiers rushed in and swept away the resisting demons step by step in a disciplined manner. The cannons first fired a round of bombardment, then the grenadiers threw all kinds of holy water bombs. Even if they couldn't kill them, they would still cripple them. Then the archers suppressed them, and finally, the infantry advanced. On the Horde side, it was simple and violent. Often, it was a direct Loktar, ogre charge. If they couldn't kill the enemy, they would consider it their loss. Anyway, outside the front line, the reinforcements and the injured soldiers formed 2 parallel lines that did not intersect. They were busy and orderly. The demons and fell orcs that Illidan had set up in the temple retreated step by step. On the Alliance's side, Mother Sharas had been beaten like a dog by William and his men. Her arrogant and frivolous expression could no longer be seen on her face. 2 of her 6 arms had been chopped off by William, and her body was riddled with wounds. All that was left was the question of how long she could last. On the front line of the Horde, Willan and Thrall worked together to attack the soul box. It was obvious that they had reached the end stage. Illidan took one look and knew that the soul box would not last much longer. Of course, what was even more infuriating was that in the video, he saw Illidan and the other 4 members of the Alliance doing nothing. That's right, on the surface, Duque seemed to be thinking for the 4 of them. But in reality, would he allow the 4 of them to join Illidan again? After all, they were 4 people who had stepped into the realm of heroes. He would not let Illidan take advantage of them again. Duque used this method to secretly take advantage of the 4 of them. And the last scene made Illidan's face as dark as ink. This was because he saw Akama, whose soul had been extracted by him to guard the temple in the form of the shadow of Akama, sneak into the most secret prison of the temple, and release the guy that he absolutely did not want to see again, Maiev Shadowsong. Only the most powerful will could allow people to track evil and enter the dark abyss without being tempted by the power of demons. This was the will of Maiev Shadowsong. Before the War of the Ancients, Maiev Shadowsong was a high-ranking priestess of the Night Elves. For someone who did not have noble blood, this was a very impressive achievement. However, the terror and chaos brought about by the invasion of the Burning Legion made her deeply feel that only quick and decisive action was the only way to solve the problem. When the traitor Illidan was not sentenced to death, but was instead sentenced to life imprisonment, she could not contain her anger. However, she still offered to be Illidan's guardian until the day he died. She also gathered other priestesses to assist her and established the Watchers, an organization dedicated to defending the Night Elves from evil. After Illidan escaped from prison, Watcher Shadowsong embarked on a journey to hunt him down. In the process, many Watchers died, but her will never wavered. Her firm belief in order and justice carried her through many difficulties, including the time when she was captured and imprisoned by Illidan. Now that Maiev Shadowsong was released, it was obvious that according to her personality, the first thing she would do was to find trouble with Illidan. Illidan suddenly felt annoyed. He really did not know what would happen if he fell into Maiev's hands. But it would definitely be an ending that had nothing to do with happiness or stability. Illidan suddenly had an ominous feeling that he would fail. Chapter 1489. Illidan had experienced too many failures. If it weren't for his stubborn personality, his repeated defeats, and his unyielding character, most people would have collapsed long ago. Even Duque would have committed suicide after being locked in a small black room for a month, let alone being locked in a small black room for 10,000 years. In terms of willpower, even if he wasn't weak, it wasn't his strong point. An egg had a crazy amount of confidence, and had survived time and time again. But so what? Could it stop him from failing again? Duque saw Illidan's expression, and knew that his psychological attack had worked again. Although he could not understand the relationship between Maiev Shadowsong and Illidan, it was indisputable that Illidan did not kill Maiev immediately after capturing her. Although Maiev had tortured Illidan many times in the past 10,000 years, it was an indisputable fact that Illidan did not kill her immediately after capturing her. Was it the other way around? Or was it the other way around? Or should he leave her a way out in the future? Or should he leave her alone in the future? Or maybe it was all three. Duque didn't know. Anyway, Duque only knew that Maiev was very strong. If she wasn't strong, she definitely wouldn't have been able to chase Illidan like a rabbit. If Duque wasn't wrong, Maiev Shadowsong should have some kind of demigod body, and it was similar to Illidan's. Otherwise, Illidan wouldn't have needed to team up with a group of subordinates to capture Maiev. When Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, saw this scene, she felt as if she could already see the ending. Duke was like the most skilled hunter, forcing the beast, Illidan, step by step, into the trap that he had prepared beforehand. This was not only the suppression of the general trend, but it was also a chain of nooses. Hey, Duque, why do I feel like you're the main antagonist this time? Jaina very cleverly pointed out this point. Slap. Last time, he slapped the left side, this time it was the right side. Woo-woo. Jaina cried. She had been a little princess since she was young, and when she grew up, she became a queen. Other than Duque, the bastard master who pushed his disciple, who else would dare to slap her butt? Do I need you to speak out of turn? On the platform of the Black Temple, Illidan was obviously affected. He moved again, and this time he actually made a mirror image similar to the Sword Saints. At this moment, there were a total of 4 Illidans in 4 different directions, pacing in an invisible circle. Ha! Duque let out a breath of turbid air. He had never seen Illidan use this move before. However, if all of Illidan's moves were the same as in the game, then it would be too boring. Even though he was the pharaoh back then, he had no interest in such things. However, as the leader of the team, he had a wealth of experience from farming Illidan countless times. Coupled with the accurate 3D simulation of Illidan by the system elf, it was to the point where Illidan knew that he was pooping when he limped. Duke Marcus, repent for provoking me again and again. Sorry, as a demigod, I really don't know who to repent to. Duque had a strange smile on his face. In the next second, Illidan knew why. Besides, I know this move of yours too. True mirror image. Opposite to the 4 Illidans, 4 identical Duques suddenly appeared out of thin air. Their height, figure, clothing, appearance, and even their expressions and the magic contained within were all the same. If it wasn't for Duque deliberately leaving a loophole, even people like Vashj probably wouldn't be able to tell who was who. Duque let the 4 new mirror images hold different weapons. These magic weapons of different styles came from the Molten Core, Blackwing's Nest, Naxxramas, and the Temple of Ankh-Karaj. They were a powerful bonus to the mirror image's spellcasting ability, and also a great proof of Duque's success in conquering the various forbidden lands. As his strength increased, these weapons and equipment were no longer useful to Duque, but they were all soulbound. It was a waste to turn them into enchantment materials. Anyway, there were plenty of places, so he might as well keep them as souvenirs. Now that he used them, it was another slap in the face for Illidan. Look, I'm even holding the real thing in my doppelgangers. Do you have the ability to make 3 pairs of twin blades of Azzinoth? Fortunately, Illidan didn't have his eyes anymore, otherwise, wouldn't his eyeballs have popped out this time? Behind the black cloth covering his eyes, a ghostly green light flashed nonstop. It was obvious that Illidan was very angry. Calm down. Calm down. I must calm down. Although he knew that Duque was provoking him, looking at Duque's irritating face, and thinking that this was the guy who had taken over his beloved Tyrande, Illidan couldn't keep calm at all. Ah! 4 loud shouts exploded in 4 directions at the same time. In the next second, all 4 Illidan's disappeared. Mirror Doppelganger was a skill that he had learned from a Fel Orc sword saint, and it took him a long time to master. This skill had a very high requirement for talent, and it also required the coordination of the brain and the ability to command. He really didn't believe that a weak mage who didn't use all 4 limbs could have that kind of reaction and face attacks from 4 directions at the same time. Actually, Duque really didn't have that. However, Illidan knew too little about Duque. From the beginning, Duque was famous for his so-called metamagic ability multicast. Not to mention with the help of the system elf, Duque could even make 100 doppelgangers with different movements and independent reactions. However, it would be difficult to maintain the combat power of the doppelgangers, and it would be an unnecessary burden to the Outland Weave. So there were only 4, and it looked like one-on-one. In reality, there was a fundamental difference. Duque used 4 doppelgangers to deal with Illidan. Illidan was playing 1+3 with his main body and 3 doppelgangers. In the other 3 directions, one of Duque used an icicle to resist the impact of an Illidan, another used Dragon's Breath to resist the shadow impact of Eggie's doppelganger, and there was a pair of Ice Ring and Ice Spear to lock Eggie's doppelganger and a throwing blade. In the main direction of Illidan's main attack, the real egg blade drew a mysterious arc, and in half a breath's time, it cut the doppelganger and the ice barrier. That was released at the critical moment in 2. That mirror doppelganger of Duque let out a very realistic scream, which made even the Karazhan women's hair stand on end, and then disappeared. The apprentice left a candlestick-shaped staff that fell from mid-air. However, just as Illidan sped up and sprinted, suddenly a huge elemental palm fell from the sky. Chapter 1490. If the attack of the giant hammer was like the weight of Mount Tai, then the attack of the axe was like the splitting of heaven and earth, giving off an irresistible sense of toughness. Pure speed often came at the expense of explosiveness and destructive power. Illidan was not afraid of his opponent's speed. His body, which had been greatly strengthened by dark energy, was enough to allow him to ignore most low-intensity attacks. The chaotic aura of dark energy that lingered around him was also enough to crush any low-purity magical element. Now, the feeling that this elemental palm gave Illidan was the perfect combination of toughness and toughness. It was obviously the most rebellious magical element in the atmosphere of the Outland, but not only was it extremely tame, but it also reacted abnormally fast and violent. Dodge. How could he dodge? The elemental palm covered an area of 100 meters. If there were no obstacles, Illidan could still dodge at high speed. But when he thought of dodging, he was shocked to find that because of the sudden influx of a large amount of frost elements, the surrounding temperature not only dropped sharply, but also greatly slowed down. Raising his head suddenly, Illidan's face showed an indescribable strange expression. The green flames in his empty eye sockets, which acted as eyeballs, stared at the huge elemental hand that was rapidly expanding in his field of vision. Bang! It was a direct blow that could shatter the heavens and the earth. The entire darkness shrine was shocked, and even William and Shiraz, who were fighting fiercely, stopped for a while. After hitting Illidan, the violent elements poured out in all directions. However, Duque slammed a tiche heavily on the ground, making an incomprehensible metallic sound. In Karazhan, Jaina looked at this scene in shock. Duque's control and shaping of the elements had completely subverted her understanding. In Jaina's concept, when the element that was shaped into the desired shape hit the target, it should have completed its task. But it was not the case for Duque. The small scattered and exploded elemental balls were forcibly stopped under Duque's will and reshaped. Jaina even saw the shape of the chainsaw that was widely used in the Alliance. All the elements flew back and frantically attacked Illidan, who was suppressed in the sunken ground and unable to move. Pierce his skin, rip his wings, destroy his muscles. Aha! As if he was lifting weights, Illidan held the giant elemental hand that was falling from the sky. He used his body that had been strengthened by his dark powers to resist the mountain-like pressure as he roared like a wounded beast. Along with the roar, his entire body was immediately bathed in the flames of evil power. The evil energy that originated from the distorted void was brutally burning everything in its path. attempting to devour all elements that were suppressing him, attacking him, and harming him. Duque frowned slightly. At first glance, Illidan's actions were as ridiculous as a snake trying to swallow an elephant. But why did the Burning Legion burn down one planet after another, killing all life and turning those planets into barren lands? Of course, some of the demons were bloodthirsty, but more importantly, the army needed to collect more dark energy in order to expand. The source of dark energy was harvesting, squeezing, corrupting, and finally transforming life and souls into dark energy. If left unchecked, once Illidan devoured more than half of the elements around him, or if Duque lost control of the elements, it would not be fun. Duque had not used the holy sword since the start of the battle. He gently shook the sword, and suddenly 4 phantom clones of Alonso's Fail bathed in holy golden light appeared around Illidan. In the blink of an eye, 4 became 16, 64, and 1024. The holy light archbishop's phantoms were densely packed, all of them coming from the same mold, filling up the entire platform. Seeing that they were surrounded by a group of Alonso's Fail, even Kaisi and Vasht were extremely surprised. Every single Alonso's was chanting a mysterious and strange prayer, their chanting echoing in the air above the platform. Light comes from darkness, and from darkness comes light. It was repeated over and over again, like an endless brainwashing cycle. Illidan knew that the easiest way to deal with this kind of chanting was to not listen, not listen, not listen. But Duque was even more shameless than him. He used the elemental hand to press down on him, so that he had no hands to cover his ears. On the other side, Tang Sanzang's chanting spiritual pollution was activated, and under the control of Alonso's, who was hidden in the magic net, the phantom clones of the 12 archbishops began to activate the magic circle. This holy light circle, which was taught by Willan, could really reverse the energy that was corrupted by dark energy. It could be said to be the nemesis of dark energy. B*** starred. Illidan was furious. He never thought that Duque actually had the power of the holy light. Duque laughed. What? You're only allowed to devour my elements, and I'm not allowed to convert your dark energy? You're the first and I'm the 15th. It's very fair. Duque's fair and just look almost made Illidan's lungs explode. Don't besiege my lair if you can? Of course, Illidan could not say this out loud. He could only keep it in his chest, feeling very uncomfortable. The green dark energy was still surging around his body, and in a short span of 10 breaths, suddenly, the dark green light shone brightly. Even on the plains outside the Black Shrine, a huge green light pillar could be seen shooting up into the sky from the top of the shrine. What is this? Every single one of the allied soldiers was stunned. A terrible roar came from the top of the shrine, and everyone could not help but look up. The shrine did not stop shaking, as if something terrible was being nurtured above, and was about to wake up. A faint roar came from the end of their vision, as if an ancient giant beast was roaring. The evil aura was so thick that it was almost tangible, and it made the entire sky above the holy shrine gloomy. Dark clouds rolled in the sky, and suddenly, there was a flash, and a very unusual black lightning split the chaotic starry sky, and descended from the sky. The next moment, what was supposed to be a bright lightning bolt suddenly turned everyone's vision black. Although this period of time was very short, it naturally caused widespread panic. Holy light! What the hell happened? It was as if a portal had opened in the sky, and something seemed to pour out from it, but nothing could be seen. In everyone's vision, it was all hazy, as if all the light had been swallowed. F***ck. Illidan, what the hell did you do? When Duque saw this, there was only one thought in his mind. As expected, history was not reliable. Behind Illidan, there was a human figure formed by dozens of highly concentrated dark energy that looked like dark runes. Chapter 1491. The upper body of this thing was a few runes that were built together, and the lower body had runes that were spread out as feet. All the runes on the whole were on a flat surface. As an old player, a veteran transmigrator, and someone who had once personally gone to Shatrath City to embark on a pilgrimage, but was actually collecting Nara's holy water, foot-washing water. How could he not recognize that this thing was once a Naru? But seeing his terrible color that was 100 times darker than coal ash, Duque immediately knew that this thing was a fallen Naru. According to history, there should never be a dark Naru on the list of bosses in the Black Temple. The problem was that ever since Duque transmigrated, he had never stopped causing trouble. Not to mention a dark Naru, even if Kill Jaden came, it would not be impossible. As the worst butterfly that changed history, Duque said that if he did not curse, he would have nothing to say. Kai Zi, who was next to him, finally came to a realization and said, "Ah, it's Muru." It was originally a guard of the storm, but when Illidan led the army to attack the storm for the first time a few years ago, it was taken away. Duque's teeth hurt. Duque would not feel strange if anyone said this, but since it was Kale, that's who said it, then he really did not know what to say. The storm, to be precise, was originally an interdimensional spaceship used by the mysterious Naru to travel in the universe. 25,000 years ago, Willan, who refused to be in cahoots with Kill Jaden, took his compatriots and fled Argus in the Naru's the storm. When the Naru came to the Outland and entered Shatrath City to participate in the battle against the demons under Illidan, only Muru was left as a member of the storm. In the original history, it was Kai Zi, who became Illidan's subordinate, who led his thugs to carry out a raid on the storm, captured Muru, and sent him as a gift to the main city of the Blood Elves, Silvermoon City. During the invasion of the Scourge, many priests lost the ability to sense the holy light. They thought that the holy light had abandoned them, so they abandoned the path of the holy light and tried to enslave the holy light. Muru was imprisoned in the basement of Silvermoon City. Every Blood Knight needed to obtain the pure power of the holy light from him to enslave the holy light. Under the continuous extraction of countless people, Muru's holy light power became extremely weak. Under such circumstances, Muru was corroded by Kill Jaden's power and degenerated into a dark Naru. Because he was a pure energy body, he could also transform into a terrifying entropy demon. It appeared in the Sunwell Highland as the fifth boss. Moreover, it was very honored and awesome to be one of the members of the horrifying boss club that Daddy Blizzard can't kill if you don't slash it. Countless elite guilds' first clear teams had been annihilated like dogs in front of Muru, who was at the level of a father. Now the goddess of fate seemed to have played a bad joke on Duque. She actually turned the Dark Naru, who was supposed to be created by Kaizi, into a strong ally for Illidan. Duque did not know what Illidan had done to Muru, nor did he know if Kill Jaden had left anything behind. All he knew was that things were getting out of hand. Duque suddenly realized something and turned his head a little uneasily. He opened his mouth wide and shouted at Vashj and the others, "Do it!" However, in the vast expanse of strange black light, the darkness seemed to devour everything. After a circle of black light suddenly burst out from Muru's body, a black hole formed above Muru's head, and then the entire world became silent. Every powerhouse saw the people around them shouting something, but they could only see their mouths open and close, but no sound came out. Sound seemed to be completely devoured. Not only sound, but also elements. The elements such as arcane, fire, and frost that Duque relied on as his greatest help were all swallowed by the black hole created by the Dark Naru. Without the arcane elements, there was naturally no magic communication. In the next moment, the five powerhouses, including Duque, were shocked because they found that even each other's vision began to blur. Human vision was because light entered the eyeball and formed nerve signals in the eyeball, which were transmitted to the brain and adjusted by the brain to form a picture. If even light was devoured, then there was no need to care about vision. Duque's face was pale. He really did not expect that Illidan could actually make a move like Muru. It was difficult to define what kind of existence a dark Muru was. Muru itself was not very scary. What was scary was that it could be used as an existence similar to a nuclear power plant, and do all kinds of incredible things. Under normal circumstances, it was a sacred source of holy light. This level of consumption of holy light foot wash was definitely a drizzle, and it could make as much as it wanted. And the Dark Naru had released its stored dark power, which was now this black hole. Duque did not know how much things or energy a black hole of this level could devour. He only knew that it was definitely a lot. He had to do something, Otherwise Vashj and the others would probably be wiped out in the Black Temple. At this moment, in the middle, Sal and Valen had reached the final stage of besieging the soul box. It seemed that they would be able to overturn the soul box with a little more effort. But at this time, everyone felt the black hole located at the top of the Black Temple. Valen stopped. He raised his head and looked up at the place a few floors above. He gently raised his hand, and the holy light that spread out from his body outlined the shape of the Naru at the top. Teacher, that is. Iril the Hoof said in a trembling voice. Muru, so it's here. Valen replied in a voice that seemed to be in a trance. Will the Naru also fall? That big black hole gives me a very bad feeling. Iril's voice became more and more shaky. Yes. If left alone, the black hole may even expand infinitely, and within a few minutes the entire Black Temple, and even the entire Draenor, will be swallowed up. What? This time, even Sal could not remain calm. He led the Horde army here, of course for justice, to free his compatriots from the slavery of Illidan. But so many of his compatriots died with Illidan. This was definitely not what he wanted. Can't you do something? Woken shouted. Of course. Valen said firmly, and at the same time he turned his head and shouted. The road of the Draenei against the Burning Legion. Someone must continue to carry the war flag. I have led everyone for so long, and it is time to let go. I have my duty, and you have your duty. I announce that the next Archbishop will be Iril. Ah. The Hoof was stunned. What? Merritt, who was fighting, suddenly realized something. The Draenei warriors guarding the outer perimeter were also unable to remain calm. What was Archbishop Valen doing, actually announcing the next Archbishop in advance? Chapter 1492. This was obviously entrusting an orphan to him. In terms of reputation and experience, how could a little Imriel be the Archbishop? Even if she was now the successor to the Archbishop, she was still far ahead of him. At that moment, some Draenei were indignant. Naru can prove Imriel's piety, and she will be the best bridge of communication between the Draenei and the higher-ups of the Alliance. Valen only had time to say this sentence before his entire body lit up. That was the purest form of holy light. In an instant, Valen's figure became extremely tall, even reaching the ceiling of the palace that was more than 20 meters tall. In a trance, everyone seemed to hear the purest and most beautiful hymn. Countless golden runes floated in the palace, each rune shining brightly. Not only did they dispel the surrounding darkness, but they also passed through the thick ceiling and reached the highest level of the Black Temple. Duque suddenly understood. He waved his hand and stopped trying to gather the elements to fight against the black hole. Instead, he went into a strategic defense mode. At the same time, he turned a large number of elements into a giant hammer and smashed through several floors of the temple with a loud bang. The dense ice element formed an absolute domain that protected Willen. The berserk wind and snow shattered all the flying rocks, but did not harm Willen in the slightest. An ice stairway appeared, leading from the middle level to the top of the Black Temple. Don't even think about coming up. Illidan was also anxious. Of course, he knew how difficult it was to deal with Old Man Eridar, who was first on Kill Jaden's kill list. Once his holy light got close to Muru, there would probably be variables. Therefore, his choice was to take advantage of the opportunity, when Duque reduced the Elemental Hand's elemental output to forcefully break free and directly attack Valen. Illidan never expected that the person who stopped him was not Duque, but Kael. That's. Kaizi snorted coldly. His entire body seemed to become one with his phoenix, turning into a giant phoenix that firmly blocked the stairway that Valen came up from. The fire elements of the phoenix were not extracted from the outside world, but from its own power. As a divine beast, when the phoenix unleashed its full power, anyone would have to avoid its sharp edge. Go away. Illidan performed a gorgeous maneuver similar to Thomas's spin. As he flew backwards, he slashed at Kael that's more than 10 times. As a fire mage, Kaizi did not have ice barrier. However, Illidan had forgotten that the prerequisite for fire element was arcane element. Kaizi's arcane magic was also very good at it. Impact barrier. This shield was a headache for many players before he transmigrated. It could absorb a huge amount of damage. Even with the sharpness of the egg knife, it was able to withstand the first wave of attacks. When the shield was about to shatter, Kaizi knew he had completed his mission. He didn't persist and instantly retreated. This time, it was Vash's turn to shoot dozens of lightning arrows at Illidan. Ugh! Illidan was filled with hatred. Vash, you traitor. Traitor? Haha. Vash showed a look of concern for the mentally handicapped. Illidan protected his vitals at the critical moment, and took more than a dozen arrows, all for the last chance to fight back. After adjusting his posture, Illidan still had a chance to rush over again. At this moment, there was a sudden crack under his feet. As an old rival who had loved to kill each other for 10,000 years, Illidan's heart skipped a beat. He knew what he had stepped on, Maiev Shadowsong's dam trap. Not to mention that he was slightly injured now. Even if he was at his peak, he would not be immune to Maiev's trap. This was a trap specially made for a half-elf half-demon like him. The person who understood you the most in the world was definitely your enemy. Maiev had chased Illidan for so long and specially made a perfect tonic wine. It was not something that Illidan could easily break. Kneel down. Maiev's cold voice sounded behind Illidan like a ghost. Sure enough, with this declaration, Illidan's knees softened and he knelt on the spot. It was the kind of extremely bitter and absolutely helpless kneel. Maiev's figure, wearing a dark green cloak, suddenly appeared behind Illidan. She was like the most ruthless assassin. With her sawtooth ring that looked like the sun and moon Vajra wheel, she slashed at Illidan's back fiercely. Almost every time the wheel went down, it would take a large piece of Illidan's flesh, pieces of bat wings, or the muscles of his back. This big sister watcher, who was imprisoned by Illidan and then turned over again, mercilessly cut the flesh of her most hated prisoner. Valen originally wanted to climb up as fast as possible, but he found that Duque had thoughtfully turned the ice stairs into a hand elevator. The ice stairs automatically and quickly lifted Valen up, giving Illidan and Muru the illusion that there was a small sun slowly rising under the Black Temple. The light was like the first light of dawn, washing away the darkness. It even outlined the fine lines on the floor of the decisive battle platform that were painstakingly drawn by the Drenii craftsmen in the past. On the plains far away from the temple, the soldiers who were waiting to attack saw with their own eyes the terrifying dark ball of light that had just risen up, disintegrating like a stain washed away by the river. Bathed in the holy light that was like the rising sun, Duque couldn't help but sigh. As expected, the holy light of the little priest Alonsis Fail couldn't compare to the old priest Valen. But no matter what, it seemed that Illidan's fate of kneeling had deviated from its original trajectory, and was forcefully corrected by the hard work of the crowd. So what if you have Muru? I have Valen on my side too. The degenerate and the fraud were a perfect match. Muru, who was originally going to destroy everything with the black hole and ruin Duque's victory, suddenly burst into flames in front of everyone. A golden flame burst out from his dark chest, and soon after, golden cracks spread from the location of the flame to the entire black body. On the surface, it looked like it was going to turn the entire dark Naru into ashes, but in reality, just as the Naru of the light could turn into a dark Naru after using up all of the holy light, the dark Naru could also turn back after using up all of its shadow power. The rune-like components on Muru's body started to light up with golden halos, and this change sped up the fading of the black color on his body. In just 3 seconds, Muru, who was supposed to be a great enemy, was now glowing with golden light, and once again became a holy Naru. Praise the holy light. Alonsis Fail, who had originally used the magic net to send his clone to the scene, was happy when he suddenly realized that the holy light behind him had weakened. The first thing he saw when he turned back was Valen, who had collapsed on the ice platform, and Imriel, who had rushed to the platform without him knowing, had a blank expression on his face. Chapter 1493. At this moment, Duque's mind was in a mess. No matter how he looked at it, Valen looked like he was about to die. Duque cursed in his heart. He really wanted to yell, "Goddess of Fate, this isn't the right script." In the original history, Valen had indeed died. Why was it said that one died? Because in the version of King of Draenor, The Valen in the main timeline was fine. Instead, in the Draenor world where the brainless roar went to cause trouble in another timeline, the Valen in that branch of time died trying to save a fallen Naru. The one who died was something like a clone Valen. And now you're telling me that the Valen in the main storyline is in trouble? Duque really couldn't figure it out now. Duke knew that she must be feeling terrible as she watched Valen fall to the ground, and Imriel rush over to help him up. Valen lay on the ice. The holy light that surrounded him moments ago as bright as the rising sun was getting weaker and weaker. He didn't say a word and just smiled. Like a doting father, he stretched out his trembling hand and gently stroked Imriel's head. The holy light on his body had disappeared, and now he looked no different from an ordinary old Draenei. One couldn't tell at all that he used to be one of the 3 big shots of Eridar along with Kill Jaden and Archimonde. Duque was a little lucky, but also a little unlucky, to witness the scene of Valen's death. At this moment, Duque suddenly understood. In fact, Valen was very old, even for the Draenei who claimed to have eternal life. In the torment of being chased 25,000 years ago, in the repeated assassination and encirclement, it was impossible for him to not be injured at all. Valen might have been unable to hold on for a long time, but with a stubborn persistence, he stubbornly stood in front of his people. He wanted to use his last breath to find a way out for his people, but at the same time, he also wanted to repay the Naru tribe for saving the Draenei. If it weren't for the Naru who used a spaceship to rescue the Draenei, who refused to associate with Sargeras from planet Argus, there would probably be no Draenei left in the world, and no one would know the secret of the Burning Legion. Over the years, Muru had protected the Draenei more than once. This was an inevitable repayment. Whether it was for Muru, or for the sake of purifying the dark Naru called Kara, Willan would sacrifice his life without hesitation. Imriel looked sad, but when she realized that Wayland's death could not be reversed, she accepted it. A Draenei girl's ethereal and clear voice echoed in the sky above the Black Divine Palace. With the help of the translator, Duque understood. The darkness will eventually pass, and all the suffering will be worth it. May our companions be as numerous as the stars in the sky, as endless as a stream. I hope that pain can sharpen our hearts, and that failure can guide us. I hope that we can meet more comrades. I hope that we can finally defeat the Burning Legion. Listening to Imriel's singing, Duque fell silent. He still did not know what to do about Willan's death, or rather, he was at a loss. Suddenly, Duque saw Willan smiling at him. The Draenei prophet raised his right index finger shakily, and used the last of his strength to shoot a beam of light at Duque's brow. The next moment, Duque, who was in Karazhan, found that his will was connected to a strange world. He immediately saw an unusual sky above his head. For conspicuous moons immediately attracted his attention. The air was amber, and the blue rock veins twisted and intertwined in thousands of different ways, forming strange rock structures. Duque did not see any water source, but the blue rocks were like surging waves that were frozen in an instant. The scene was like the fantasy of a talented artist. Some creatures were scattered on the surface of the rocks, or hovered in the air. They came in all shapes and sizes, and some were even difficult to describe. Bright colors, different movements, dances, games, battles. Almost none of the patterns formed had any real meaning. Duque tried his best to find an abstract meaning in all the chaos. At this time, a creature that looked like a Draenei appeared, leading many demons, and began to kill all the creatures in this world. This guy easily used green energy to flatten everything around him. After clearing up an empty space, he knelt in the ruins that he destroyed, and used his claw-shaped fingers to draw mysterious symbols with terrifying energy. When he was done, the slaughter around him stopped. At this moment, it was abnormally quiet, and the whole world was in a terrifying silence, waiting for the death knell to ring. Then, there was an explosion that destroyed the world. When Duque tried to divert his attention to try to trace this spiritual message, the transmission stopped. Wait. Willan. I haven't. When Duque came back to his senses, something even more ridiculous happened. Under everyone's gaze, Willan's translucent soul flew out of his body, and was then sucked into the soul box that was on its last breath. F***CK. What the hell? Not only did he suck Orgrim, he even sucked Willan's soul. You're just a soul box. You're going against the heavens. For a moment, Duque had the urge to destroy the soul box on the spot and save Willen's soul. But at this moment, Thrall and the others could not stop in time, and directly destroyed the last form of the soul box, the source of wrath. After all, the source of wrath had something called wrath aura. Who knew how much wrath energy was stored in the soul box? And when it released this negative energy, everyone in that space would have to bear the shadow damage that would double over time. Without a transcendent existence like Duque to hold the line, this was a battle of mutual harm. Either Thrall and the others would be crushed to death by the shadow energy, or they would destroy the soul box first. The current situation was just that cruel. They did not dare to stop, and they could not stop. Looking at the soul box that sucked Willen's soul in at the last moment, and then turned into a delicate little box, everyone, be it the Alliance or the Horde, was stunned. They did not know what expression to use to face this situation. This can I use vulgar language? Can't. Then I have nothing else to say. Duque's head was about to explode, and he did not know what to say. But before he gave a sad speech, there was one last thing to do: take care of Illidan. Chapter 1494. The Draenei were on the verge of losing their minds. Back in Argus, they had a prosperous country and kind people, but all of that had been ended by Sargeras's power. When the other two leaders had turned their people into the devil's minions for power, Velen had indeed chosen to lead his people into the light. However, this time, they had been on the run for a full 25,000 years. During this painful and unforgettable period, it was Velen who had been the spiritual pillar of the Draenei. He had constantly guided them, encouraged them, and led them out of despair and hardship. It could be said that for many Draenei who had been born on the spaceship and on the run, Velen was their only hope of survival. Now this pillar of support for the entire race, the immortal Velen, had suddenly fallen without any warning. This caused all the Draenei to fall into grief and madness. Merrid was in a rare state of rage. He waved his holy light warhammer and rushed up the ice stairway that had carried Velen to the highest point of the platform. Suddenly, the heaven stairway broke. Malrad fell from a height of more than 3 meters. Then he saw Duque standing at the edge of the hole, and anger welled up in his heart. Duke Marcus, what are you doing? Duque turned around slightly, his eyes sharp. He glared at Merrid. Look at your holy light, and think about what Prophet Velen taught you. Fighting against evil requires a warrior with a pure heart, not an avenger. Are you worthy of Velen's teachings? Merrid's body trembled. Only then did he realize that the holy light on his body had become sparse and messy. The holy light was the purest manifestation of the will of justice in one's heart. If the motive was not pure, the holy light would naturally not be pure, and the power of smite would plummet. Merrid was speechless. On the other side, Imriel gently put down Velen's withered body that had lost its soul. She picked up her warhammer. Imriel's body lit up with a holy golden light. This was the Black Temple, the darkest and most filthy place in all of Draenor. Eredar warlocks from the twisting nether carried out all kinds of forbidden experiments, and the wails of the souls of the wronged filled the once sacred hall. Hence, the sky above the darkness shrine was always shrouded in the most evil and thick black clouds. However, at this moment, a golden dot of light grew larger and larger. From a small dot, it became a golden pillar of light that pierced through the heavens and the earth. At first it was a little vague, but soon everyone heard a female voice. She said, Prophet Willen's flame of life has been extinguished. The Draenei are not destroyed. The Draenei people love peace, but as long as the Burning Legion is not destroyed, the Draenei people will join hands with everyone in the Alliance to raise the Alliance's war flag high and let it fly high above this glorious world. Long live the Alliance. It was a vow to fight. Every Draenei, every allied warrior who could see Imriel, could clearly see the warhammer in Imriel's hand turning into a golden torch. The holy light was blazing, burning fiercely. Then, another pillar of light pierced through the heavens and the earth. That was the will of countless Draenei paladins and priests. Then, the pillar of light gently turned into a beautiful arc of light, merging with Imriel's pillar of light, becoming an even bigger pillar of light. Duque was a little stunned. He watched as Imriel's body was surrounded by golden flames. In an instant, a dazzling soul war flag rose from Imriel's back, and immediately turned into a pair of shining golden wings. Now, Imriel had 2 wings like her compatriots. However, the Eridar demon had ugly bat wings, and now, her hooves looked more like an angel. Alright, hooves and angels. Just the thought of it made Duque drunk. He really did not know that there was such a trick. Thinking about it, it seemed reasonable. After all, when he did not give up his moral integrity, it was because of a kind-hearted big boss who passed it on to him that he was able to avoid the crisis of his soul falling into depravity. Spiritual energy originated from the soul. Since souls could be passed on, as one of the greatest manifestations of soul energy, it was not impossible to pass on the holy light to others. Of course, the hooves were not that powerful, but the problem was that Valen had them. Looking at the system notification, Valen passed about 18,000 years worth of holy light energy to Imriel. Duque felt a headache coming on. Once upon a time, Duque was a Wuxia fan. Every night, when he could not sleep, he would fantasize about some old man passing on 60 years worth of inner strength to him. Now that old fart Valen actually gave Imriel the holy charlatan card. Now the hooves were really going against the natural order. Looking at the shiny golden hooves that were even more holy than the golden holy Saya, Duque felt a little sad. 18,000 years worth of holy light energy. Why didn't you give me some? While Duque was complaining, he suddenly received a message from Alonso's fail. Duque, His Excellency Valen seems to have poured all the remaining holy light energy that he could not into Imriel's body into the magic weave before he died. The system notification again. Valen has injected about 8,000 years worth of holy light energy into the magic weave. That's good. Valen, you're a good friend. I'll take care of your hooves from now on. Even though he knew that Valen could not give him the hooves, that feeling was like winning the lottery or opening a treasure chest and getting a divine artifact. Her hooves fluttered her golden holy light wings unskillfully and rose into the air. Then, with a ridiculous posture similar to a standing long jump, she jumped onto the highest platform of the Black Temple. Commander Marcus, I, Imriel, as the Draenei leader candidate, request to join the crusade against Illidan. The sound of her hooves was sonorous and powerful. At this time, there was no longer any hesitation on her youthful face. Duque instinctively wanted to refuse at first. It was not that he did not think highly of Imriel's potential, but it took time and opportunity to turn potential into strength. Since ancient times, many geniuses had failed halfway and could not fulfill their potential. Valen suddenly died, and Duque did not want another Draenei leader to die. This was because the rest of the Draenei were mediocre people, and Duque did not want to see any of them die. But when he saw the girl's pleading eyes, Duque nodded. Originally, you were not qualified to participate in a battle of this level. This is your protection. But seeing that His Excellency Valen sacrificed himself for the Alliance, I agree. This time, I will hold the line. Remember, you owe me a favor. No problem, Imriel replied brightly. Her hooves sang the holy light battle song loudly, bathing her in light and charging straight towards Illidan. Chapter 1495. Just now, Duque had the time to do so many things, of course, because Illidan was too busy to leave. Maiev Shadowsong locked Illidan up for 10,000 years, and chased him for nearly 10 years. She was able to put Illidan, who was a demigod, in such a difficult position with her strength that had yet to enter the realm of the gods. Of course, it was because her tactics and special skills were quite effective against Illidan. Illidan was already an agility hero, and Maiev's agility was even higher than Illidan's. In addition, after Illidan entered the Outland, because of the semi-demonization of his body, while improving his magic ability and close combat ability, the increase in weight caused his agility to decrease slightly. The gap in speed between the two could be said to be getting bigger and bigger. Usually Illidan was faster, but Maiev was faster. Maiev had a skill similar to Mage's Flash. This kind of short-distance teleportation that could be used almost continuously allowed her to escape danger every time she was in danger. Illidan first fought with the 4 demigods, then slap Duque with the elemental palm, and then spend a lot of magic to release Muru and drive him to open black hole. Just now, because Duque had purified Muru, he suffered a mental backlash. It could be said that Illidan was already quite injured. Duque had the time to take care of the hoof because Illidan was being attacked by Maiev and Vashj. Maiev fought Illidan in close combat, and from time to time, she would use Shadow Trap to give Illidan a hard hit, or suddenly disappear, followed by a set of backstab and shadow ambush. And Vashj would look for opportunities, and when she wasn't sure, she would never shoot indiscriminately. After a few rounds, the extremely smart Vashj actually faintly grasped Maiev's attack rhythm, and made a few successful coordination. This made Illidan feel even more uncomfortable. Illidan suddenly saw an obviously unqualified hoof running up to him with golden light all over his body. What he felt in his heart was not happiness, but endless anger. He could see that Duque quite valued this Draenei girl. If he was a despicable person, then he would definitely think that the opportunity had come. As long as he captured this blue-skinned girl, maybe he would have a chance to escape. But he was Illidan. The arrogant and arrogant Illidan. The stubborn Illidan who always insisted on doing things his own way. He disdained taking hostages. Therefore, he felt humiliated when he saw a young female holy knight, who did not even have a demigod body charging at him. Don't look down on me. Bearing the brunt of Maiev's sword formation and Vashj's triple shot, Illidan suddenly accelerated and slashed at Imriel. Warblade of Azzinoth was an extremely fast weapon to begin with. This was the first time Imriel had seen such a faintly discernible sword technique in his life. This was a world of difference from the macho man style that she had faced before, where every hit was like heaven and earth. Imriel had been tricked. The knife flew past the hoof's clumsy parry and slashed at her neck. For a moment, Vashj and Maiev, who wanted to save him, cursed in their hearts. Who knew that an accident would happen? Clang. The mighty Azzinoth's blade actually bounced off. In fact, when Illidan swung his sword at Imriel's shoulder and neck armor, he could not help but feel bitter. The crescent-shaped curved blade in his hand was a divine weapon through and through. But this slash only left a deep gash on the opponent's armor, and did not hurt her flesh at all. Illidan could not help but feel a chill in his heart. He was a demigod, and one slash could not even break the opponent's defense. This proved that his dark energy had weakened, and the opponent's power of holy light was strong. The powerful holy light created a strong armor-like effect, reducing most of the damage from the Warblade of Azzinoth. Illidan was startled, and so was Imriel. She never thought that the gap between her and her opponent was so huge. If not for the power of holy light inherited by Master Valen, she would have been decapitated by that slash just now. One would not know the power of the divine realm if one did not fight with a real powerhouse. Her strength had actually soared to the level of a hero after a few months of training. In addition to Willen's holy light, she originally thought that she would be able to fight against any demigod. However, Willen's simple oblique slash had caught her off guard. Illidan's attack was not just fast. His well-honed technique allowed him to double accelerate his sword according to his opponent's reaction. Obviously, he had guessed her next intentions and actions, so he took the initiative to attack the vital area that she had to save. If not for the holy light's stronger restraint on Illidan than expected, she would have been decapitated. At this moment, Imriel deeply understood what Master Valen meant when he said, "You are no match for the top powerhouses." For a moment, Hoof could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Of course, she was not the only one who broke out in a cold sweat. Duque, who was holding the line, also broke out in a cold sweat. He was betting that Hoof would be invincible at the last moment, and that would be victory. Who knew that Hoof would be able to withstand it? In the following battle, Imriel was simply more and more shocked. She knew very well that she could continue to fight, not because she had become stronger, but because the other two powerhouses, Maiev and Vashj, were entangled with Illidan. Even if Illidan did not have the time to attack her, the absolute difference in attack speed still caused her to be suppressed by Illidan, and she almost could not even fight back. But when Illidan's fast sword slashed her body, she could still withstand it. This was because when Illidan slashed her, he would also receive the damage from her aura of punishment. and she injected a large area of holy power into the ground, which was also hurting Illidan. On the other side, Illidan was also frustrated. In the beginning, this Draenei girl was so weak that if it was a one-on-one fight, he was confident that he could kill her in 3 moves. But as the battle went on, Imriel had become more and more mature, and her counterattack and defense had become more and more stable. In contrast, Illidan had become her sparring partner, teaching her how to kill him with real swords and spears. At this moment, Illidan finally realized that no matter how much he suppressed this girl in the duel, no matter how much advantage he had, he would never be able to win. Now he was like a trapped beast, making his last resistance, and letting out a final roar. No. 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 I am Illidan Stormrage, the strongest night elf in the world. This is definitely not my ending. Illidan no longer had any hope of killing Maiev Shadowsong or Vashj. But at least he still had a chance to drag this Draenei girl down with him. Chapter 1496. Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, felt bitter as she watched Illidan being beaten by the 3 heroines. Illidan was proud. Even though he had fallen into the path of demons, no one could take away his pride. Originally, with Illidan's demigod skills and speed, no one could stop him if he wanted to leave. Living an ignoble existence was not something that every expert could do. Illidan was still angrily attacking every enemy in his field of vision. He used his dual blades and his dark magic, but everyone could see that he was rapidly weakening. Rumbling sounds came from all over the Black Temple. At first, it was fierce, but in the last few minutes it had calmed down. That was the end of the battle. The allied army dragged the wounded away, and left the rest to the logistics team to clean up the battlefield. They killed the demons that were not completely dead, then blew up those that needed to be blown up, and purified those that needed to be purified. Even if the Outland would one day collapse, before that day came, the Black Temple would still be returned to the Draenei, and renamed to the Temple of Karabayr. Illidan was like a cornered beast. He still had too many things to do. His dreams had not been realized. His grand blueprint had only been completed a few pieces. Was he going to give up just like that? No. He was not willing. He was not willing. Even if he lost to anyone, he could not lose to Duke Marcus, the hateful human who had stolen Tyrande from him. No. Did you see that? Did you see that? I haven't lost. I haven't lost. Illidan yelled like a madman. Whether it was the 3 heroines who were besieging Illidan, or the powerful figures who were holding the line, none of them took Illidan's words to heart. They only thought that it was the last words of madness of a traitor whose soul had been corrupted by evil energy, and who was already more demon than elf. Only 2 people understood what he was saying. Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, hugged Duque tightly. She wanted to rub her perfect face into Duque's chest. Duque could clearly feel a wetness spreading from his chest. It was Tyrande's tears. Compared to Tyrande's simple sadness, Duque was actually the most conflicted. At this moment, Duke was finally certain that Illidan was just like how it was in history. He was actually playing the Infernal Affairs game. Why was it that he had been hunted by Maiev for so many years, but had never fought with her? How did Illidan react when he heard that Tyrande and a small number of her sentinels had fallen into the river Aravath and been attacked by the Scourge? It was salvation. Fleeing to the Outlands was one thing, and so was the final battle with Earthies. Who would have thought that Illidan had such a magnificent demigod-level power? If he was merely controlled by dark powers, if he was merely a traitor and a loser, why did he not seek revenge on his people who used him and then abandoned him like trash? Why was he willing to join forces with his brother, who had banished him, to save Tyrande even though he was already a demon? In fact, he didn't even hate Duque, who had stolen Tyrande from him. He didn't even want to kill Duque. Yes, his goal had never changed. He loved Tyrande. As long as Tyrande was happy, he would even allow Duque to continue living in this world. He respected and loved his brother, and he also loved the people who had created his lover and brother. He had made mistakes, and he had never denied his mistakes, but his original intention had never changed. So, even at the very end, he who was eager to prove his strength, the person he wanted to fight was not Maiev who had been chasing after him for so many years, Nor was it Vashti who was born as a high elf and then betrayed him. Instead, it was the hoof that had nothing to do with the elves, Ireel. Was this not a little ridiculous? But it was not ridiculous at all. At this moment, Duque heard a famous quote from his history. Betrayal? In fact, I am the one who was betrayed. I am still being hunted by people. And I am still hated by people. Now that I'm blind, I can foresee the future that others can't. Sometimes, fate must be in your own hands. No matter what you think, no matter what you do, I want to protect you. Even if he had fallen into the path of demons, he still wanted to protect his lover and people. It was really amazing. Unfortunately, he had no one to tell, and no one would know. On the scene, Illidan released his final ultimate move. Suddenly, dozens of shadow fiends the size of small hills appeared on the platform of the temple. This kind of demonic creature that lived in the shadows had very disgusting characteristics. This was a special skill that was completely different from elemental magic. It could directly attack the target's shadow on the ground, causing the shadow to bite the target. The feeling of the body forcibly entering a coma state, but one's mind was abnormally clear, anyone would feel terrible. The Kiraj twin emperors, Kale, Bats, and Vashti were all instantly imprisoned by these huge shadow fiends. With their strength, the imprisonment only lasted for a short moment, maybe a tenth of a second, or maybe even less. Even if Maiev, who had not been hit, summoned a powerful, heavenly vengeance, and did not fall into a coma state, he was still busy. Duque also looked busy. He let Alonso's doppelganger fiercely attack, and clean up the surrounding shadow fiends. For Illidan's surprise attack, this was enough. Illidan's figure suddenly shrunk. He was no longer the extremely burly huge demon, but more like a former demon hunter. His figure was thin and strong. He dashed forward quickly, and because his speed was too fast, his posture was too low, giving the illusion that he was swimming close to the ground. Not good. Imriel's heart skipped a beat. She no longer had any hope of getting lucky. She took a horse stance, squatted down, and put the shield on her left arm in front of her. Her two S-shaped legs were like two compressed springs, ready to withstand the impact at any time. At the same time, she directly activated her invincibility. However, Illidan still came. The incomparably sharp, Azanatha's warblade, was close to the ground, and a strange emerald green light swept out. It looked like it was going to cut off Imriel's legs. Her hooves gritted her teeth and suddenly sat down. She wanted to smash the lower edge of the shield into the ground to block this strange blade. Who would have thought that the egg blades were only called egg blades when they were in pairs? Before the second hand that slashed over could even cut, it seemed to have triggered some strange special effect of the twin blades. The main hand's warblade of Azanoth actually slashed at an even higher and more exaggerated speed. If one had to describe the speed of this move, it would be lightning. When ordinary strong people saw this green light, their heads would already be flying into the sky. Yes, it was that fast. This was the speed of a blade that had gone through millions of times of practice to reach the realm of God. She was dead. Illidan was so sure. Chapter 1497. What happened next made everyone who saw it speechless. If Illidan's slash had missed, and his all-out attack had been dodged by Imriel, he might have admitted that Imriel had grown into an unimaginably strong enemy in the short but intense battle. But the person who changed the course of this deadly attack was Duke Marcus. This made Illidan unable to accept it. What made it even more difficult for his pride to accept was that Duque had caught his warblade of Azanoth between his fingers. That's right. Duque had used his mortal body to catch Illidan's lightning-fast attack. Even though it was not as gentle as a butterfly's wing, Duque had paid a huge price. His entire left hand had exploded in order to catch this dark-powered divine weapon. His skin and muscles were torn apart, leaving only the bones and tendons of his fingers filled with arcane energy. But Illidan still felt that the time and space around him had frozen, and he greedily breathed in the hot air. Ow! How is this possible? Illidan panted in a barely audible voice. He tried hard to restrain his body that was about to tremble as he recalled the unbelievable scene in front of him. He had slashed as fast as he could. He was fast, but Duque was even faster. Because he was so focused on killing Imriel, He had neglected a very important detail. Duque, who was dozens of steps away, did not move. But in fact, Duque had moved. Duque had left a real illusion on the spot, and then his entire body was in a state of invisibility, followed by the fire element blazing haste and haste. When a demigod-level mage used this skill, his speed was too fast. No haste potion in the world could achieve this effect. Even with Illidan's dynamic vision, he could still see a series of afterimages left behind by Duque's speed. His strike could be said to have arrived first even though he had launched it later. Who knew that Duke's strike was even more terrifying than his? Duke had caught up to him from dozens of steps away after he had launched his strike. Duke threw away the staff in his hand and used his left hand to grab his divine weapon Warblade. Initially, he thought that he could cut off Imriel's neck in Duque's hand. It turned out that he had thought too much. On the blade that he had extended, there were indeed 3 fingers that were very characteristic of the Scourge army: thumb, index, and middle fingers. Moreover, he did not grab the blade from the front, but bent his wrist and grabbed the back of the blade from the back. He did not enter the path of the blade, but caught up with the speed of Azanatha's Warblade. While the main hand of Azanatha's Warblade was grabbed by Duque, the other hand's blade collided with Imriel's shield. At this critical moment, Duque's right hand suddenly lit up with the brightest golden light. That was the holy light of the Demon Slayer in Duque's hand. At this critical moment, Duque's right hand suddenly lit up with the brightest golden light. That was the holy light of the Demon Slayer in Duque's hand. Looking at the rapidly magnifying golden light in his field of vision, at this moment, it was too late. Illidan used all his strength. Whether he continued to slash forward, pull back, or dodge left and right, he could not escape this attack. The slow spell that Duke had just cast made Illidan feel like he was pulling on a chain that was tied to a mountain. His extremely slow and heavy body made it impossible for him to escape. If Illidan's attack was said to be as fast as lightning, then Duque had forcefully reduced Illidan's speed to the level of a snail, and then used the speed of a tortoise to demonstrate what it meant to be relatively fast as lightning. Under normal circumstances, Illidan would not have been hit by this attack no matter what. However, Duque's attack made him feel even more pain and despair. Duque's face was emotionless. He did not show any deep hatred for the elven traitor, nor did he show any sympathy for him. He did not show any gloating over his impending fall, nor did he show any smugness of getting rid of a rival in love. Instead, Duque had a strange look that said, "I understand you, but don't blame me." Illidan was suddenly stunned. He remembered the various magical things about Duque, and the legend that Duque claimed to have peeped into the future in the River of Time. Could it be that Duque really understands me? There was no time for Illidan to think about life. The gorgeous golden sword finally pierced into Illidan's chest. Anyone could see that it was where Illidan's heart was. Ah! The sharp blade pierced through, but the pain of the sharp weapon was secondary. The burning holy power entering his chest was the biggest source of pain for the half-demon Illidan. Unable to bear it, Illidan let out the most tragic howl. Almost instinctively, Illidan made a dying counterattack against Duque. Duque barely managed to block the main attack of the twin blades of Azanoth, with the ice barrier. However, the offhand of the blade flashed past, and the entire right arm of the humanoid puppet that looked like Duque flew into the sky. Duque stumbled back. Illidan still did not admit defeat. He threw away the blade in his left hand and held the hilt with his right hand, trying to pull out the Demon Slayer. At this time, Imriel, who had just recovered from his daze, heard Duque's command. "Hoof, go! Smash the hilt!" Heroes were heroes because they had the courage that mortals could only look up to. Even though he had just escaped from being decapitated again, Imriel's legs under his bow suddenly straightened, and his whole body shot out like a cannonball. Go to hell, so-called King of the Outlands. Hoof used the shield to forcefully block Illidan's main blade, raised the warhammer high in the air, drew a beautiful golden arc in the air, and used the last bit of strength in his body to smash the bottom of the hilt. Like a hammer hitting a nail, the Demon Slayer, which was originally only halfway into Illidan's chest, finally broke through Illidan's extremely strengthened demonic body, pierced through his chest, and came out from his back. That was not all. The powerful impact nailed Illidan to the ground. Just a moment ago, Illidan did not understand why Duque was so stupid as to throw away his staff and take the blow with his own body. Now he understood. Atish was much more valuable than Duque, a human puppet. And Atish, which was thrown out, did not go anywhere. It was now standing behind him. This divine artifact staff with rare spatial characteristics had already sealed the entire space around it. Illidan's storm rage had nowhere to run. Ah, impossible. How could you even calculate this? Illidan's eyes were red. He roared and struggled, only to find that he was like a nailed frog. He could not move at all on the ground that had been solidified by spatial magic. The dark energy in his body flowed out of his body like a flood. Chapter 1498. Illidan was fading rapidly. At this time, the experts had already broken free from their predicament and surrounded him again. If Illidan had forcibly transformed himself back into his previous night elf form in pursuit of speed, then Illidan could no longer maintain his demon form, and became like an elf. Unfortunately, the shriveled bat wings, the demonic hooves that were beginning to degenerate into toes, and the shrunken demonic horns made Illidan look a little out of place. Demon. Hoof raised his warhammer high, obviously wanting to smash Illidan's head into a watermelon. Wait! Duque grabbed the hoof's wrist with his left hand. His hooves trembled as if he had been electrocuted. Originally, a young girl being grabbed by a skeleton-like hand was definitely a horrifying and disgusting thing. Unfortunately, it was this broken palm that brought back Imriel's memories from a few seconds ago. If it wasn't for this hand, I would have been beheaded already, the dreamy-eyed girl shouted in her heart. She didn't know when her heart had started to ripple. She lowered her head and acquiesced to Duque's actions. Ah! Illidan was still struggling, but at this time, he looked extremely ridiculous. At this time, even Maiev had put away her metal sawtooth wheel, but half of her face was still covered in frost. Everyone could see that Illidan's injuries were severe, but not fatal. Commander Marcus, this traitor is too cunning. Please allow me to execute Illidan immediately. At least Maiev hadn't completely lost his mind because of hatred. He understood that the decision was now in the hands of Duque, the commander of the alliance. Duque secretly let out a sigh of relief. At least when Akuma went to save Maiev, he first told her about the alliance's situation. That was the right move. Duque raised his chin slightly. If Sir Shadowsong wishes to kill a demon, I naturally have no objections. But it seemed that Illidan's Stormrage was not a simple demon. After all, not a single demon in a weakened state can survive a full-powered strike from me, not even Archimonde. At this moment, everyone remembered that Duque was the hero who had personally stabbed Archimonde in the back on Mount Hyjal and killed the commander of the Burning Legion. Moreover, the holy light in front of them was real. Duke and Irel's holy light was as powerful as a nuclear bomb to a demon's vital organs. Illidan was still alive. It could only be said that the part of him that was an elf was still the majority, and the appearance of a demon was just a facade. Hearing Duque's words, Ma Sun was speechless. At this moment, Tyrant hurriedly appeared. She borrowed Duque's strength to cast a projection. Maiev Shadowsong, thank you for your efforts in pursuing Illidan. But Commander Marcus was right. Since Illidan's main body is still a night elf, he must receive a fair and just trial for his betrayal. Duque pursed his lips. Did you hear that? Maiev Shadowsong. Yes. Maev's hands were trembling, and she clenched her teeth tightly. Duque stepped forward and whispered to Maiev. If a hunter no longer has prey, then a hunter is no longer a hunter. Do you understand what I mean? This time, Maev's whole body visibly trembled. I understand. Duque smiled. Very good. Before Illidan's trial by the Alliance Assembly, I will leave him to you, Your Excellency Maiev Shadowsong. Don't worry. Maiev immediately displayed her profound skills as a warden. First, she took out a pair of glittering golden shackles and locked Illidan's limbs. Then, Duque used an arm made of holy elements to pull out the demon slayer sword. Illidan shouted, Kill me! Kill me! I am the king of the Outlands. I am Illidan who slaughtered countless orcs and Draenei. Kill me. A king should not suffer such humiliation. Maev's face was cold. You are not King. You are just a shameful traitor. As she said that, she stuffed Illidan's mouth with a piece of ragged cloth. This scene made Tyrande, who was watching from Karazhan, worried. Since Illidan had been defeated, there was no need to worry about the rest of the small fries. Duque gave a slightly strange order. Destroy all demons, but try to capture as many of the Illidari demon hunters as possible. Hoof did not understand. Why not kill these fallen ones who have fallen into evil, and use dark energy as their power? Whether they fall or not depends not on what they say or what power they use, but on what they do. If the final result proves that they are actually on the side of justice, and that they have done more than the sacrifice, then I think they can be forgiven for what they have done. When Imriel heard this, she shook her head forcefully. I am sorry, Duque. I cannot agree with your point of view. I think we may have a very big difference of opinion. Difference of opinion. Duque smiled. At the same time, he turned into the dark and entered the shadow form of a priest. Duque's ability to use the conflicting powers of holy and shadow form at the same time was enough to shock Hoof. What shocked Hoof even more was what Duque said next. What if I told you that the Alliance commander Duke Marcus standing before you not only knows how to use dark energy, but was also a high-tier void lord of the twisting nether? You. Imriel felt that something that he had been holding on to was crumbling. What if I told you that I used this to infiltrate the Burning Legion, and finally blew up Sardraza's largest fortress in the Twisted Nether during the Ancient War, killing at least 5 billion demons? Duque's casual words had a huge impact on Hoof's heart. Every Draenei could count their own history. They knew how many times their race had managed to avert disaster. One of the most unsolved mysteries was that in a battle 10,000 years ago, the Burning Legion had clearly gained the upper hand, but they suddenly withdrew all the demons and let go of an easy victory. This was known as the greatest mystery. Now this eternal mystery seemed to have an answer. Imriel was completely stunned. No, not just Imriel, even Illidan, who was struggling as Maeve dragged him away from the platform of the Black Shrine, was deeply shocked. Duque's words echoed in his mind over and over again. At this moment, Illidan was finally sure that Duque, who was more like a demon than Kill Jaden who was best at scheming, must have guessed his thoughts. Of course, he also guessed that Duque was explaining to him what kind of situation he and Tyrande were in back then. Awo! Duque, you bastard! Illidan was very agitated as he struggled. Maeve's eyes showed clear disgust, and he kicked Illidan in the head. Shut up, you traitor! Chapter 1499. Victory. Long live. The wild dwarf drank from a bag of liquor, and fired into the sky. For our world. The heroic orc beat his chest with force. Karabe, we're back. The sentimental Draenei knelt in the corners of the temple and cried bitterly. Illidan's capture symbolized the end of the Allied army's outland expedition. All that was left was to clean up the remnants of the Allied army. This was very different from the historical alliance. The original alliance would at most send some guys on horseback to the various cities and towns to declare victory. In this life, Duque was in power, and the alliance's approach was more open and transparent. During the days of the alliance's battle, almost every day, there would be thieves or hunters who were specially named by Duque as Hong Kong reporters, reporting back to the front lines of the alliance in Azeroth. From the simplest march and hard life, to the laying of railroad tracks, to the battle at Hellfire Citadel, and then to opening the passage to Shatrath City, followed by the elimination of the Fell Orcs and the battle at Moonshadow Valley. As long as it was a town or factory with more than 1,000 people, there would be a special mage team stationed to report in the form of magic images and audio. Even smaller villages would use a method similar to newspapers for publicity. Although in order to control, Duque deliberately delayed the report by 3 days. Of course, this could also be attributed to the inconvenience of communication in the Outland. But for the people of Azeroth, this was definitely something new. Just like what Duque had always emphasized to the higher-ups of the Alliance. We don't just need the soldiers to know what they're fighting for. We also need the people to know where their labor, their taxes, have gone to. Only then will our soldiers take the initiative to fight, and our people will work with their lives on the line. Duque had run the alliance for so many years, and the alliance was already quite used to the wartime economy. Once the war started, they would immediately implement various plans, greatly reducing the supply of luxury goods and increasing the production of military goods. Thanks to the alliance's current strong economic and agricultural strength, there was no need for a food rationing system within the alliance. They only prohibited merchants from selling food in bulk across borders. All merchants must have a permit and sell food and specialty fruits and vegetables on time. In almost all the military industries and logistics industries, the workers automatically and consciously worked overtime, and many workers even proposed to waive overtime pay. The people of the alliance had no regrets, because they knew that they were contributing to this righteous war. It was because of their efforts that the frontline soldiers could eat canned food of various tastes, live in tents, and sleep in warm sleeping bags. Because there were reports from the front line, and every piece of military equipment had a unique number. Therefore, from time to time, there would be old workers or aunties who were pleasantly surprised to discover in the news that a certain sleeping bag or a certain shovel was made by themselves. That sense of participation was incomparable to any of the previous wars. Even though they were separated by countless light years, the people in the rear still felt that their hearts were connected to the soldiers on the front lines. The logistics unit had specially vacated a special train, so that the soldiers could write letters to their families every week. It was also very well received. So when news of victory came from the outer realm, the entire alliance cheered. Hooray! Victory! Long live the alliance! Long live Commander Marcus! Long live His Majesty Rin! Looking at the alliance flags that were stuck all over the darkness shrine, while the people cheered, they also noticed the report that was inserted in between the victory announcements. It was the image of the evil human body modification experiment sent from the darkness shrine. The scene of blood flowing, the taboo scene of forced intercourse with the blood fiends, almost crossed the magic mirror and pounced on the people. Although the broadcaster, Bishop Sally Whitemane, had already solemnly reminded the people before the broadcast that the following scene was quite bloody, many people still felt extremely uncomfortable. There were number 18 prohibitions in the alliance. Most of the current generation of alliance youths were born during the war at the Dark Portal. In addition, the previous generation had been ravaged by war, so no one felt that there was anything wrong with the alliance broadcasting this. At most, mothers would leave with their frightened children. Oh my God! That's too scary. Damn it! I can't imagine what would happen if millions of such monsters swarmed into Azeroth. Holy light above, I finally understand why the Alliance spends so much money every year to defend the Dark Portal and strengthen the Watchtower. The Alliance could be said to be united now, with full support. Even if Duque slapped his forehead and suddenly brainlessly held a general election or something, he would probably be elected with 99% of the votes. The end of the war was the end of a stage for the people, but for the higher-ups of the Alliance and the Horde, there were as many things to be done. The Horde was busy migrating people out of Draenor, which was about to be destroyed, and so were the Draenei. As the new leader of the Draenei, Imriel personally defeated Illidan as soon as he came to power. He helped the Draenei reclaim the Darkness Shrine, and renamed it the Karabaer Shrine. This made Imriel's position suddenly stabilized. Although it was impossible to invest any manpower and resources in the Karabaer Shrine because of the collapse of Draenor, it was completely different to give up on the shrine and snatch it from someone else, and then tell them that they didn't want it. With Duque's reminder, the Draenei also began to prepare for the migration of the entire tribe. The initial plan was to fly the Eye to Mystic Blue Island in Azeroth. This was completely different from history. In history, it was a dumb guy who listened to an egg's order to kill the Draenei, and the Draenei were desperate, so they flew a spaceship that looked like a large escape pod to Azeroth. In this life, it was the Draenei who methodically flew the entire spaceship to Azeroth. This was a completely different concept. Duque and the higher-ups of the Alliance all believed that with the Eye, they would definitely be able to strengthen the air defense around Darnassus. After a busy day, Duque finally left Karazhan's command room and returned to his bedroom. After becoming a demigod, the physical fatigue would no longer exist. Now it was just that there were too many things to do, and he was mentally tired. As soon as he returned to his room, Duque felt that something was wrong. The room was very dark. Someone had turned the magic lights to the darkest. Then Duque was shocked. He was not surprised that there were maids, dragons, and maids in his room. But for this high priest who suddenly appeared, wearing a nude apron, Duque was really shocked. Damn, could it be that the little notebook I hid under the bed that I wrote when I was bored has been found? Tyrande smiled charmingly and gently cupped her face with her left hand. My dear, you're back? Then do you want to eat first or take a bath first? Or eat first, what about me? Chapter 1500. There's such a benefit? Duque's eyes lit up. When he first taught Tyrande, she refused no matter what. After 10,000 years, even though Tyrande had accumulated a lot of pressure, there was a subtle change in their standpoints. From an ill-fated relationship to a true relationship, Duque never forced Tyrande to do anything she didn't want to. In the harem, it was undeniable that Duque was very interested in Tyrande. From a priestess who was as pure as ice and jade, to slowly tormenting her, and the millions of night elves outside worshipping his woman. This feeling was as if he was scribbling on a piece of white paper, smearing it with traces that belonged only to him, and then framing it up. A bunch of ignorant bystanders would worship it as a holy object. That kind of domineering monopolization and flaunting was displayed to the fullest. It was a pity that due to work, they didn't spend much time together after reuniting. In order to cherish the opportunity, Duque rarely asked Tyrande to do anything special. Usually, Tyrande would do whatever she wanted to do. Who would have thought that Tyrande would actually dig out his little notebook and become a self-taught genius? Even though Duque had purposely stayed there to see which genius would come and try it out, Duque had thought that Vashti would make the first move. He didn't expect Tyrande to be the first to taste the crab. Even though he knew why Tyrande was here, the sly Duque didn't hesitate to eat the sugar coating first. Duque smiled like a fox. Which one do you think I should choose? For once, Tyrande was immersed in her role. She had a vexed look on her face as she placed her hands above her abdomen, her fingers chattering anxiously. Oh, I just remembered that I forgot to cook dinner and run the bathwater. What should I do? Damn. This cosplay. I'll give you 101 points. I'm not afraid of you getting arrogant with an extra point. Duque immediately attacked, pulling Tyrande over with a fake version of Death's Grasp. Without saying anything, he used 5 armor penetrations. Tyrande was a cloth-armored class, so her armor was low. Now it was almost 0. Annoying. Are you really annoying or just pretending? Fake. Yo, big sister, you're courting death. Duque laughed heartily. Very good. It wasn't easy for me to cultivate a demigod body, and now I can finally put it to good use. Very quickly, Tyrande was first hit by Bewitched, then as if she had been hit by Flaming Storm, her entire body was engulfed in heat. Faced with Duque's charge, Tyrande hurriedly activated Suppression and shouted, "You dare?" At the same time he activated Swift Sprint, and ran away. You're asking me if I'm touched? Of course I dare to move. Duque immediately used Backstab on Tyrande, who had accidentally fallen to the ground in an oar's pose. The feeling of being stabbed repeatedly made Dumuk cry, which he hadn't felt for a long time. It felt so good. This was an unlimited backstab with unlimited energy. Once upon a time, Duque had envied those thieves who could hide behind the boss but and stab it infinitely. Now he had also become a thief. Yes, the kind that stole people's hearts. The flag duel had once again proven his martial arts skills. Once the godly sword was unleashed, the world would be shocked. Duque was satisfied. After defeating the fairy, Tyrande curled up in Duque's arms like a cat. Duque. Yes. Thank you. Duque did not say anything. He just gently stroked Tyrande's soft and bright hair. Once upon a time, Duque thought that such a head of bright green hair would look very exaggerated. But after looking at it for a long time, he felt that it was very unique and pleasing to the eye. After being together for so long, Duque naturally did not suspect that Tyron still had feelings for Illidan. It was just a kind of attachment, a bond that could not be severed as they grew up together. Tyrande also did not doubt whether Duque would execute Illidan. She knew very well that if Duque wanted someone dead, he would not show mercy on the spot. He would not hold a trial later and make her feel uncomfortable. When Duque pierced Illidan's chest, it looked like he was aiming for his heart, but in reality, it was in the narrow space between his heart and his left lung. If it was a thicker weapon, Illidan would probably be dead. Duque's Demon Slayer sword was obviously a piercing sword. Since such a large amount of holy light directly into Illidan's heart did not kill him, Duque would not stab him again. So this time, Tyrande's apron play was to thank Duque. The next meeting of the Alliance leaders was the same. In Storm Fortress, Duque spoke passionately. I used holy light that was enough to kill Archimonde, the commander of the Burning Legion, and pierced Illidan's chest. After that, Archbishop Imriel used the same powerful holy light attack, but it did not kill Illidan. Instead, it purified the demonic blood in his body. So I do not think that Illidan is truly evil. Here, I object to Illidan Stormridge's execution. Imriel could not sit still and stood up on the spot. Wait, what about the tens of thousands of Draenei that Illidan killed during the time he informed Draenor? What about the blood debt of my people? Duque was silent for 2 seconds, then sighed. Archbishop Imriel, between countries, between races, it is not just simple hatred. In the face of a stronger enemy, we must all learn to let go of our hatred. Every leader and king present had experienced the cruelest battle at the door of darkness. Every one of us had friends or family who died at the hands of the orcs. Because of the existence of the Burning Legion, now we have no choice but to form an alliance with the orcs. This time it was Imriel's turn to be silent, but the stubbornness in her heart made her raise her head again. What if the Draenei insist on Illidan Stormridge's death? The hall fell into a dead silence. Tyrande secretly clenched her fists. To her, in front of the High Duke, she had no position to oppose the Draenei's pursuit. At this time Jaina spoke up. The alliance is an interracial, multi-kingdom alliance that aims to maintain peace and security in Azeroth. Our aim is to seek common ground while reserving differences. If we cannot resolve the problem through discussion, we can only vote at the throne conference. The minority must obey the majority. When the results are out, any country or race will only have 2 choices. One is to accept, and the other is to choose to leave the alliance. Also, when the Draenei first joined the alliance, they did not ask for the alliance to kill Illidan Stormrage for the Draenei. They only asked for the survival and safety of the race. The alliance has no obligation to start a war of revenge for the Draenei. After all, this was before the Draenei joined the alliance. Imriel was speechless. Whether she was a leader or a politician, she was too inexperienced. Chapter 1501. At this time, Duque rolled his eyes at Jaina. Jaina immediately knew that she had gone too far with her words. Too far? Perhaps so. But Jaina did not regret it. In Jaina's eyes, this Draenei girl did not understand politics or a country at all. Without Valen, the Draenei race would not be of much use to the Alliance. Their population was small, and their combat power was low. Their once advanced technology had all been lost and could not be used at all. Valen, the only person who knew the secrets of the Eredar clan, had been sucked into the soul box. As for the Naaru, they were 2 different races. If they had the heart to persuade the Naaru, once the Naaru and Draenei were separated, the Draenei would be a burden to the Alliance. In a situation where there was no political leverage, Imriel still insisted on Illidan's death. Putting aside the relationship between Illidan and Tyrande, just the fact that Duque did not make a move meant that there must be a reason behind it. This girl who looked like Eredar was really stupid. Jaina raised her chin slightly and stuck out her nose. She did not speak. In the throne room, there was a strange silence. This time, not only Imriel but even Merritt, who was beside Imriel, felt that something was wrong. If one had to describe the atmosphere, it would be estrangement. There was an invisible barrier between Imriel, the leader of the Draenei, and the other leaders of the alliance, but everyone could feel it. Merid, who was standing beside Imriel, used his elbow to poke Imriel's arm. Imriel finally understood. She raised her head and said in a clear voice, "I am sorry. If I do not execute Illidan, who is stained with the blood of my people, I cannot answer to my people. If there is a special reason, I am willing to listen." Imriel's attitude was neither humble nor arrogant, and she received praise from many leaders of the alliance. At least, Master Craftsman Jurban and Kudrin looked at her with approval. "All right." Duque sighed deeply. "All leaders with voting rights, please stay. The rest, please leave for now." Everyone's heart skipped a beat. It was rare for a throne conference to take such a confidential measure. This meant that what Duque was about to say was the absolute secret of the alliance, or even the entire Azeroth. Merid had a strange expression on his face, but when he saw that even Aurelia, Vashj, and other non-core leaders had left, he had no choice but to leave as well. Soon, there were only a dozen people left in the large hall. The atmosphere became heavy, and what made the leaders feel even more pressured was that the will of the moon goddess, Elun, had descended. Duque explained, "The following content concerns the survival of Azeroth, so please swear in the name of the moon goddess Elun that you will not reveal a single word of what you are about to hear. If you violate the oath, the mighty power of the goddess lurking in your souls will burn your souls to ashes." "I swear." The leaders swore one after another. They immediately felt a gentle yet resolute strength enter their souls. After everyone swore, Duque received Elun's message. Then Duque raised his hand, and suddenly a huge arcane barrier rose from Duque's body. In this huge blue sphere, all elements that did not belong to Duque were forcibly expelled. Then Duque's eyes swept across the leaders repeatedly like lightning. It was not an ordinary gaze. This divine gaze easily saw through everyone's body, from clothes to skin, to subcutaneous tissues, to internal organs and even souls. Although Duque had left everything to the system elves, every leader felt as if they had been completely seen through. Duque's women did not feel that it was a big problem, but Imriel's cheeks suddenly turned crimson. "Alright, it should be safe now. If even a true god and a demigod like this can cause problems, then there's nothing we can do about Azeroth." Duque sighed. "What I'm going to say next is that Illidan is probably the key to our destruction of the Burning Legion. This possibility is 99%. After Illidan was captured, he did not say a word. His tight-lipped attitude infuriated Maiev. He neither denied nor admitted to the accusations of his crimes. When he was scolded, he would occasionally retort to Maiev. As for his interrogation, it could be said that there was no progress at all. Just because he did not say anything, did not mean that Duque did not know. After carefully examining Illidan's body, Duque finally confirmed that Illidan, as in history, just happened to be doing his own thing when the Alliance attacked the Outland. When the Alliance had not attacked the Outland, Illidan began to secretly implement his own plan during the time when the Alliance reorganized the army. He trained a group of demon hunters and formed Illidan, waiting for the opportunity to attack the Legion's world. Among them, Illidan personally led the attack on the Dreadlord's home planet, Nazriza, and stole the Seal of Argus from the archives. This device allowed Illidan to directly enter Argus, the common home of Eridar and the Draenei, and the current headquarters of the Legion. Knowing that Nazriza was attacked, the Burning Legion immediately sent a large number of reinforcements here, and Illidan was waiting for this moment. He forcibly tore open his own portal, so the world changed, just like when Nazul turned Draenor into a broken outland. The turbulent energy tore Nazriza apart, and the entire planet exploded into pieces. Because this planet was in the void, the souls of countless demon hunters were destroyed along with their bodies, and could no longer be resurrected. The Legion was furious, and in order to retaliate, they opened more portals in the Outland. Just at this time, the Alliance and the Horde sent a large-scale army to attack the Dark Portal, and came to the Outland. Demon Lord Kirill planned to set a trap for the Azeroth army on the Hellfire Peninsula, surround and annihilate them. However, Illidan discovered his plan and successfully thwarted the siege. Using the Seal of Argus, Illidan projected his soul into Kil Jaden's palace, But before he could do anything, he was discovered by Kill Jaden. Just as he was about to be caught and his identity was about to be revealed, a mysterious voice sent Illidan's soul back to his own body. Illidan then met the oldest Narazila, and learned all the secrets of Sargeras, the Burning Legion, and the true darkness lurking in the void. But Illidan refused to say anything. It didn't matter. After Duque confirmed that he was one of them, he naturally had a way to help him get away with it. I once asked Lord Valen about the Eridar's home planet, Argus. I found out a lot of interesting things. For example, the defense mode there, and the quality of the earth there. Lord Valen even used telepathy to send me an image of Argus. Chapter 1502. It was Argus's information. The leaders all stared at the image of Argus, trying to imprint the scene into their minds. It was a beautiful and high-tech world full of Azeroth that all races could not understand. Of course, all of this was purely an image from 25,000 years ago, when Argus had not been split. However, there were many things that would not change, such as the palaces of Archimonde and Kil'jaeden. Duque pointed to a place. Everyone, please pay attention to this place. Everyone noticed that it was a brick with a psychedelic color. Then Duque took out a small stone from his dimensional bag. The stone was very small, but under the magnification of the magnifying glass, everyone immediately recognized that this small stone was the same color as the brick of Kil'jaeden's palace in the image. When we attacked the Outland, Illidan went to Kil'jaeden's palace. That doesn't prove anything, right? William said neutrally. Duque did not refute. He first summarized the defense system of Kil'jaeden's palace, and made it into a list for everyone to see. Then he took out a magic mirror photo. Everyone look at the mark on Illidan's leg. This time, everyone did not speak. Duque said again, the question is, if it was a normal summon, why would it trigger the defense system of Kil'jaeden's palace? Imriel clenched her fists and did not speak. Duque switched the image. It was a group of night elves with partial demonic appearances. Now look at Illidan's Illidarii army. They call themselves demon hunters, not half-demons. We have confirmed that the method used by this group of demon hunters is to kill a powerful demon, then extract the essence of the demon's soul, seal it with a special magic, and suppress it in their own bodies. This way, they obtain the powerful strength of the demon. Please note that the souls of the demons that are treated in this way cannot return to the twisting nether and be resurrected. Every leader had the same question in their hearts. Would the Burning Legion really let Illidan do this? Please note that after I and the former Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's fail, the souls of the demons that they used included powerful demons like the Lesser Void Lords. When I fought in the Ancient War, there were only 1,000 demon overlords in the Twisting Nether. At this point, everyone had a more reasonable judgment in their hearts. Whether or not Illidan was against the Burning Legion was another matter. At the very least, he was definitely not loyal. Duque really wanted to say something like, when I returned from the Ancient War, I was fortunate enough to peek into Azeroth's future from the River of Time. I saw Illidan in the middle of planet Azeroth, which is now the location of the Great Maelstrom, fighting against the Burning Legion. But after some consideration, Duque said another version of the statement. The situation in front of us now is that Illidan's strength has reached the level of an intermediate Void Lord. None of us here have the power to completely destroy his soul. If we kill him, his soul will return to the Twisting Nether. If he is our enemy, then he can still be resurrected by Kil'jaeden. At most, his strength will be reduced a little, but he can still continue to attack Azeroth. At this point, Duque made his final statement. On the other hand, if he is really what we think he is, then a living Illidan is more valuable than a dead one. This time, Imriel really had nothing to say, but she raised another question. All right, I accept the reason for not killing Illidan. But how should I appease my people? After saying that, Imriel lowered her head deeply. The Draenei girl's depression made Duque sigh. Duque said, next, Elun and I can focus on researching the soul casket, and let Valen's soul see the light of day again. If he is a prophet, he will probably have no problem appeasing the Draenei. Before Valen fled, He had been one of the 3 leaders of Eridar for thousands of years. In addition to the time he fled, he had a reputation of 30,000 years. How could a rookie leader like Imriel compare to him? This was already the best result. Duque clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. All right, I think there is no need for the throne to vote now. The leaders all smiled and shook their heads. At this time, Jaina spoke. But if we use the holy light as a reason to pardon Illidan, it will be easily seen through by the Burning Legion, right? Tyrande, who had been silent all this while, clenched her fists and suddenly looked up. Just as she was about to say that she would pardon Illidan in her name, Duque shook his head and smiled. I will talk to Isra and tell him that Malfurion Stormrage pleaded with Isra to not execute Illidan. Then let Isra claim to have seen some kind of revelation. This time everyone laughed. Only Dooku would dare to use the Dragon Clan as a pretense. The dragon race already had a lot of power. Isra, who was in charge of the Emerald Dream, was Cenarius' adoptive mother, and was also the big boss behind the Night Elf Druid religion. With Isra's appearance, the Night Elves would not dare to say anything. Secondly, the dragon race was used to being arrogant. Who would dare to object and confront the dragon race themselves? Anyway, with Duque's good relationship with the dragon race, anyone who objected would not be able to do anything about it. Perhaps this was the privilege of the Guardians of Azeroth. When Duque said this, Tyrande immediately gave him a look of infinite gratitude. Duque knew that he would be in luck again. Under Duque's manipulation, the impact of Illidan's imprisonment was minimized to the greatest extent. Firstly, Illidan did not attack any race on the Azeroth continent, whether it was the Night Elves or humans. Secondly, the only Draenei who had a deep hatred for Illidan, as well as some Draenor orcs, were all attracted by one thing. Duque and Elun worked together to open the soul box, and as a result, a strange situation appeared. The souls of the former Great Chief Orgrim and the Draenei prophet Willan were both trapped in the soul box and could not come out. Both of them used their powerful spiritual power to control the souls in the soul box, but like conjoined twins, they could not be separated at all. Now, if the tribe wanted to communicate with Orgrim, the Great Chief had to come out. If they wanted to find Willan, then Willan had to come out. Alright, now both sides could not do without these two. Then what should they do? After some discussion, because the soul box was the Draenei's artifact, the soul box was handed over to the Alliance for safekeeping. The safekeeping place was in Theramore, supervised by Jaina. If the tribe wanted to find Orgrim, they could also come over. It was not too far away. Usually, the tribe could have a small team stationed in Theramore as warehouse managers. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.